So old. It's kind of amazing.
I think I got more white hair than you, though.
Maybe.
Okay, we're live. Welcome everyone to the Magic Internet Money Podcast. I'm here with my special friend, Junseth.
Oh, hello. I didn't know we'd reached that status yet.
Yeah, you're very special.
Friends. So that's good. That's good. I appreciate that. For those of you who don't know who I am, hello. And for those of you who do, hello. Same greeting. Nice to be here.
Hey, so you just came from the Miami conference.
Oh yeah.
What was the level of like Bitcoin only versus nonsense crypto stuff?
So I understand that there was a shitcoin conference that was very self-aware, called Shitcoin 2021.
Okay.
So I think there were a lot of shitcoiners there, and but mostly Bitcoin. Most of the people there were pretty Bitcoiny. Although I've noticed recently that like the maximalism, people seem to think that it's prudent to not be maximalist. So they're very proud of the fact that like a lot of them are very proud of the fact that they're moving on from maximalism, or there's something else. Oh, look at that! Your wall disappeared.
Bitcoiners or like crypto people that like Bitcoin?
I think this new group of people are coming in and trying to tell maxis that they're the reasonable ones for believing more in like an index like holding of coins, and maybe they'll be right for a while, but I don't think they'll be right for forever.
Right. I mean that's been pretty popular, that view, for a few years now, that people hold their Bitcoin. A lot of investors, like crypto investors, VCs and stuff, and anybody that's promoting an altcoin, they have a lot of Bitcoin and they want to see the value of their Bitcoin go up, but they don't want to see Bitcoiners call out the other stuff that they're holding as bad investments and stuff like that. So they're like, Bitcoin maximalism is no good. You shouldn't be a maximalist. You turn away all my clients. My potential suckers. In terms of
returns, though, I wouldn't be surprised if like holding a basket of cryptos has been better the last few years. So I haven't done the analysis, but I would not be surprised.
If you're an emotionless robot that doesn't actually have
a heart,
or if you're not affected by your emotions, I mean, it's really difficult to hold an entire basket of altcoins and see them go down 98% and hold on to them and not sell them.
Yeah. So I mean, more than that, it's really difficult to, I think, if you know something is bad, to hold a bag of it.
Yes. If you're a really good trader, you've done well. That's pretty much what I think. I would really question the idea that indexing has outperformed Bitcoin. But
you can do the numbers. I've never done them, but I bet it has.
I've talked to Chris.
It doesn't matter.
I mean, I've talked to Chris DeRose about it a couple times, like every 6 months or 12 months or something. I'll check in on him, say, how's your indexing doing? And I look at his indexing thing. It's actually doing really well over the last 3 months, because obviously we're in a crypto bubble. That this is one of the reasons I wanted you to come on, because I have a lot of friends that I do this podcast for, my friends and family. Like that's kind of like who I'm trying to reach with this thing.
Friends and family.
a lot of my friends are entrepreneurs and stuff, and maybe some of them are pretty successful entrepreneurs, and then a lot of my family is just like regular people. So I guess my target audience, I don't know who they are, but that's who I'm talking to when I try to do this podcast. So on their mind, at least through what I'm getting through text messages and Facebook messages and stuff, is, hey, should I buy SafeMoon? And what about Dogecoin? Yeah. Elon Musk is promoting Dogecoin, and Ethereum is like, got all this utility value apparently, and it's going to flip Bitcoin.
Yeah, tons of utility.
Yeah, and Ripple too. Like Ripple's green.
Ripple, just the greatest coin ever created.
Yeah. So that's why I wanted you to come on to kind of help talk through this conversation, because you've been in this Bitcoin thing for what, since like 2012 or 13 or something or more?
Long time now.
Yeah. And you used to have one of the most successful popular Bitcoin podcasts, Bitcoin Uncensored, which to be honest, I've got like 500 listens at least. No, I never really listened to Bitcoin Uncensored, because you guys were like the technical smart guys that.
Oh, that wasn't our intention. We tried to be very stupid.
Yeah, but you guys are very smart, and you guys are very smart, and it was like, I don't know if I'm the target audience for that, because it also was like kind of, you guys were
I don't think you
a
listened
little
enough to that.
a little toxic to
It was
people.
mostly fart jokes.
You have a lot of fart jokes and
Mostly fart jokes.
asking people. But the thing I remember specifically was like, you would ask every guest, and I mean, I did listen to the show, but I wasn't like a diehard listener. But I would listen to the show and watch clips and stuff, and you'd ask every guest like, what's the definition of a blockchain? And that was the funnest part, just watching these people in crypto and in blockchain try to define what a blockchain was. And everybody would kind of like have a different answer, or you guys would get really technical about what the definition of a blockchain was, and you guys were clearly smart. And so I it was a shame to see you guys stop doing the podcast. So
Well,
yeah,
it's had its
people
time.
miss that. It's obvious from Clubhouse. Like, you've gotten pretty popular from coming on Clubhouse and hanging out with us. People want to hear what Junseth thinks of stuff.
Well, all this stuff had its time. I think Bitcoin Uncensored had its time. It was pre-Bitcoin culture. So I think that we had a significant role in developing Bitcoin culture. I'm very proud of the toxic culture that we've left behind. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I think that whenever people call Bitcoin culture toxic, it gives me a little warmth in my bosom, sort of like a Mormon saying the prayer. And I forever hope that it remains because we have developed sort of an antibody to shitcoinery and bullshit. But let me articulate a little bit the problems with the methodology of like indexing in Bitcoin. I think the problem with indexing is that you're holding coins in equal proportion to generally probably their market cap, right? So you might hold the top 30 coins in proportion to the market cap, and they're going to go up or they're going to go down. They're going to do whatever the hell they do. And what happens is when they go up in an indexing scenario, you don't sell them and take profits. When they go down, they can go down hard and even disappear off that top 30 list. So, I think that in Bitcoin, if you wanted to be a good trader, you'd probably have to like allocate, 90% of your portfolio to Bitcoin and then 10% to like 5 other coins or something like that, and just basically make money on the volatility. I think that's the only thing that you could really do to actually walk away with gains. But I'm not a trader, so that's just sort of my quick thoughts on how one ought to trade. I would think if I were doing it, that's how I would be shitcoining. But every single one of those trades is tax consequences. Mm-hmm. So, my preference is just to hold Bitcoin if I can.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's not boring to hold Bitcoin either. As we've seen from the last 12 months, Bitcoin's been on quite a ride. So you can get a lot of excitement and gains from Bitcoin. But then once you start piling on the indexing and I got to diversify into Ripple because it's cheap, and Dogecoin because Elon Musk is shilling it, and Ethereum because it can do smart contracts, you're just adding to the Bitcoin volatility. And yeah, unless you've got like an AI or whatever, like an algorithm making your decisions and weighting differently based on, taking profits based on trend following rules or something like that, you're probably going to like get emotional and sell. And you're most likely going to, what I've seen a lot of people do, become a community member or become a community member and start really believing in these narratives that Ripple's shilling or Doge, or like people are actually believing that like Elon Musk is going to take over Dogecoin and just abandon his his companies. And then
wouldn't take much to take over Dogecoin. Nobody nobody really is working on it, and it's a small community at this point, a passionate one, a loving community, but it's an old coin. I mean, it's so old. I don't think that these people even realize it. They're merge mined with Litecoin because nobody wanted to mine the thing. Mm-hmm. So they needed to basically borrow Litecoin's power in order to even keep the thing running. So, welcome Elon. You're about, what did Bitcoin Tina call it? The initial FUD download. You've done your download and now you're on step 1. Congrats. You're shitcoining. That's what everybody does. Have fun in that journey. I hope that you get to the mountain faster than everybody else, but you won't.
Yeah, it seems like even the the news that came out of the conference yesterday was that the country of El Salvador is going to adopt Bitcoin, make it legal currency. And then today he's retweeting Justin Sun about like Tron is going to set up a shop in El Salvador, and every Bitcoiner is like, no, it took 24 hours. My God, this is the quickest shitcoin journey ever. Like the guy just talking about legalizing Bitcoin as money, and the next day he's like taking shitcoin money and retweeting Justin Sun.
Correct.
It's like this is a simulation.
Well, Elon Musk, you know, in Bitcoin Uncensored, one of the tenets that we would discuss regularly was this idea of having no oracles. And Bitcoiners have completely forgotten that. So like Elon Musk shows up, what do? They worship him. They're so happy about it. Michael Saylor shows up, they're excited. They worship him. They never heard of Michael Saylor before he bought Bitcoin. Any of these big guys show up. I mean, who gives a shit? Who gives a shit?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
These people can buy Bitcoin all they want. They're no more important than you or me in this protocol. They got here later than you and me. They understood exactly what was going on here later. Why do we care what these people think? Like I'm glad they're here. I hope that they prosper. I hope their coin holdings go to the moon. I'm all for that. But like they're uninteresting as participants.
What is your mission, Junseth? Like, what's your reason for being in Bitcoin? I don't think I ever heard you kind of talk about that before.
Well, I enjoy laughing a lot.
Okay.
And I've never been in a space where there's more people that I can laugh at.
Good timing. The dog agrees.
My dog, lady, shut up.
Oh, we got a viewer comment here. Hi, handsome nephew. I don't know. Is she talking to me or you?
John Pink? I don't know. Hey, John.
Oh, Jean. Oh, that's my aunt.
Jean?
My aunt Jean.
Oh, Jean. Hey, Jean.
Hey, I'm handsome.
Well, when family says so.
Yeah, you take what you get.
But yeah, I don't know that I have a mission. I enjoy looking at interesting things. I enjoy laughing a lot. There's a lot to laugh about in Bitcoin. It's also the most technology ever created in my lifetime, and I can't think of anything more enjoyable, maybe other than maybe reading a book
or playing level 1 every night before bed.
Oh yeah, I play Railroad Tycoons every night before bed. Yeah, that's that's the thing I do. That's how I unwind at night.
That was so funny when you said that. I couldn't believe someone. I don't know how that came up, but yeah, you've got. Oh, someone asked you if you play video games. You said no, I don't play video games except for every single night I play level 1 of Railroad Tycoon before I go to bed.
We have to do something to unwind. I'm really good at level 1 of Railroad Tycoon 2.
So if you got into Bitcoin for the fun of it, and obviously you guys had a funny show, what was the like?
Originally, I got into Bitcoin because I was an anarchist and I thought we were going to overthrow the government. So I've since been disabused of that thinking and have gone through therapy and cured myself.
What was the therapy?
Watching libertarians invest.
Watching them invest.
Yeah, they are dumb as shit. I was at a conference and there was an obvious Ponzi scheme that was sitting at the center. They'd sponsored the conference, and I was like, oh, okay, well, this will be fun. So I went to the table and I just sat there. And as people would come up and they would get pitched, I would say, this is very clearly a Ponzi scheme.
This was a libertarian conference?
No, it was a Bitcoin conference.
Oh, okay.
It was Coins in the Kingdom, Jason King's conference.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I would just sit there and just tell people, like, this is very obviously a Ponzi scheme. Like, it's very obvious. Is what he's basically saying. He'll take your profits. He's going to arbitrage and then pay you like 9% per month. I'm like, that's not really how that works. And if he can do that, he should just keep the money himself because he'll be a trillionaire in like 4 weeks. So, I just sat there, did that for a while. And I think it was midday. One of these very famous libertarian podcasters came up to me and thanked me. And he said, thank you so much for doing that. I was about to give them a bunch of money.
Wow. Okay.
And I was like, wow. like the most famous libertarian, the one who does a whole show wherein he probably says 85 times, I'm responsible to do with my money as I please, was going to literally ship his money to a very obvious Ponzi scheme, which to me is funny. But it's also a sad state of affairs when like you watch people.
Okay, but it's not just libertarians, right? Because look at DeFi. It's Silicon Valley people, VCs. DeFi is pretty much a Ponzi scheme, in my opinion. Like it's literally the definition.
We didn't know how stupid everybody was.
It's not just libertarians.
No. But libertarians are the ones that scream against rules for like protecting investors.
Right.
So that's the difference. Like, you know, when investment banks come in and start investing in scams, I feel far less bad than when like, you know, Robert, the libertarian who's like 65 years old, throws his money into a Ponzi scheme as a Hail Mary because he is dumb. And he thinks that he's Mr. Responsible, and he spent his whole life collecting gold and trying to get rich. And then, and it just never, you know, his ship never came in. So he's trying to get his ship to come in. He ships out his money and his ship never comes back. So his money is gone forever. And those people are problems.
Yeah. And it's sad to see, but also flip that around though. Like I was pretty, I don't know. I felt like some joy when I saw Ron Paul was given the keynote at Bitcoin 2021 because
I was in an elevator with him that night.
Oh yeah. How'd that go?
Yeah, I was coming out of the one of the parties, and I shoved myself into an elevator, and I was sitting there, and I looked at the back, and like there's this tiny little man sitting in the back. I was like, oh fuck, Ron Paul's in the elevator.
Did you say anything to him?
I said, oh fuck, Ron Paul's in the elevator.
You did? Okay.
Yeah.
What did he say?
He smiled like this.
He's
That's
like, oh, great.
I realized I was like, oh, I think I'm with his bodyguard. Okay. Like I probably wasn't supposed to get in this elevator.
Yeah, you're just having Borat flashbacks.
Yeah.
You start reaching for his crotch.
Touched his butt.
So, okay. So like Ron Paul spoke and it was awesome because to me, it feels like Ron Paul inspired a lot of people like me anyways. I'm not going to speak for you or anybody, but libertarians that kind of got I don't know, just excited by the idea of auditing the Fed and ending the drug war and raising hell about unconstitutional war and realizing that the money system is a big scam and looking into the Federal Reserve more and seeing that it benefits the rich people and like the 0.1%, not even the 1%, but the people at the very top that have their finger on the money printer key, you know, print.
I did that today. I hit a bunch of letters. I hit P and then I hit 100. Printed 100 of them.
100 what?
It felt 100 copies of the same document.
Oh yes.
I felt like the Fed. I mean, I'm not so critical of the Fed or like the current money system as most Bitcoiners. I'm not like utterly bearish on, you know, money. Mm-hmm. I think for me, money is an interesting sort of historical thing. It's come about. It's sort of been like iterated on and discovered what we can do with it over the years. Paper money is a fairly new invention. You know, before that we had, you know, basically metals, right? And the paper money system is a very new system. I think it's like, I think libertarians like to assign sort of a nefarious intention to the creation of money. I tend to view it more as like an iterative thing that has occurred over the years, and Bitcoin is the newest iteration. I don't think that there's as much evil or insidiousness as people think in inflation and creation of money generally. It's tough
to go down the path that it's either pure evil or pure good. Like I think it's like definitely net negative for most people in the world that they print so much money. I feel like a hard money system, whether it's gold or Bitcoin or whatever, would be at least like not like a disinflationary system or a deflationary system, but at least something that's like some kind of sanity towards how much inflation that there is in the currency. It feels like there's just enough, if there's just enough printing and just enough fractional reserve, to allow people to take risk with their capital and get, do extend credit and do all that stuff, then sure, we get people investing in new businesses and technologies and stuff. But you combine like inflationary money printing, like extremely inflationary, like supply of money, with 0% reserve requirements and like 10x money multiplier, and then combine that with bailouts for companies that buy their own stock, and like instead of investing in research and development, they're investing in buying their own stock back. Everything, it's just the system we're in right now feels like a total scam. And I think you're right. It's not just money that's the problem. It's not just fractional reserve that's the problem. It's like they control everything, and everything is fake. So it feels good.
I just don't agree with that. I just don't agree with that, Brad. Like, not everything is fake. Like, you can go and spend your dollars on things. You can feed your family. You can eat. Inflation is pretty small. We're probably actually in a deflationary period right now. And we've been so for a very long time.
In terms of the money supply or prices, or
how do you define money that? Supply, libertarians love to define inflation as money supply increase, and it just isn't. Like, inflation can be caused by a lot of things. Inflation can be caused by famine. Inflation can be caused by pandemics. It can be caused by all sorts of things. It's not just like the Fed does its best to hit a target inflation rate. And the beauty of that is if they hit it, you can pretty much plan it. Like, it allows people to basically plan how much they need to set aside or whatever, and companies what prices need to do and everything else. So it's not like inflation. Qua inflation is not necessarily bad in itself, as long as it's, in my opinion, managed and low. But I mean, there's a lot of libertarians who disagree. But I tend to think of libertarians as sort of the Chicken Littles of the economy. They've been telling me for 30 years that all these things are going to happen, and I'm waiting for the great collapse when they become the oligarchs of America with all their gold, and it's just never happened. And I'm just betting that it never will. Like, they might accidentally do it by buying Bitcoin, but even libertarians early on were very blind to what Bitcoin was. They said it wasn't backed by gold, so it couldn't be worth anything. Okay, well, I mean, I think Tina says it best when he talks, and I don't know that I agree with everything Tina says, but he says this, and I think this is true. The reason that, this is my modification of it, but the reason that Bitcoin doesn't need to be backed by gold is because gold is the thing itself, and Bitcoin is the thing itself. Mm-hmm. You can't back the thing itself by something else.
Yeah, no, that's what the feelings I had when I saw Ron Paul speak was like, okay, there was a sect of us who were kind of like libertarian leaning, or, not card carrying members of the Libertarian Party, but liked the ideas of what Ron Paul was talking about with his anti-war message and his like sound money principle message. And a lot of us from Occupy Wall Street and Ron Paul's campaign and things like that turned around and started seeing Bitcoin and started getting into Bitcoin. And now look at Bitcoin Miami 2021. It's like Bitcoin taking over the city. Tens of thousands of people.
But if you think back to that time, Brad, like the thing that every Bitcoiner used to say, and this was, I mean, I really was the first to say this. People said that they were going to destroy the banks, and I said long ago that banks were just going to become custodians of Bitcoin. That was going to become their role. And now we have banks getting in and talking about custodying Bitcoin. Yeah. And Bitcoiners who, like libertarians who used to say that they were here to destroy the Fed and destroy the banking system, are all up in it. They're all okay with it. So, like, there's no principles on that side.
I kind of disagree with that, because I was definitely one of those people, and I kind of had to like think through that myself in 2017 when we started to see Wall Street come in, and I rationalized it myself with saying like, okay, well, it's fine because it's the first time that like the average Joe and like the plebs and the nerds and the early tech adopters dumped their bags on top of Wall Street, and they got in late. And like, it's the people against Wall Street. So in a way, it's like justice. It's the first bubble that kind of like the people benefited from. But that doesn't change the ideas that like we thought early that, there's a lot of things we thought early that kind of didn't shape out to be exactly.
But my point is that you could have known, like, had you applied an actual principled heuristic to like the space, you could have known. And
I think you have a ghost. Like, what's that sound?
It's probably a truck.
Oh, okay. It's not a ghost.
No, but like my problem with like applying political ideology to Bitcoin is you don't have a valid heuristic to actually know what's going to come. And like I've made a lot of predictions in Bitcoin. Some have been inaccurate, but most have been pretty good. And the reason is because my heuristic is that things are going to basically look the same.
Yeah, I mean, part of me thinks that's what's going to happen too. Like, there's definitely a very good chance that the status quo can continue for the next 50 years, and that they can just keep making things different. They can just keep changing things so that, you know, like modern monetary theory. If modern monetary theory gets passed and people just get behind the idea, like Bretton Woods 2.0, debt doesn't matter anymore. It's just all about GDP, and like don't print too much compared to your GDP. Well, then they could keep that party going for a long time. They could do something like, you know, everybody that buys a house gets 50% of it subsidized by the government, and everybody's credit card is now 0% interest for 5 years, and your credit line is doubled. Like, they can do all kinds of crazy shit to just give people the access to like stay afloat while they try to just keep kicking the can down the road and keep the system going.
Well, I think a valid.
Like,
I mean,
it's not the end of the road.
The presumption in your statement is that the system is not going to keep on going, right? At some point, that it fails, and that is not necessarily a presumption.
Well, I think it doesn't make any sense that we can keep printing money and as if debt doesn't matter without actually declaring that debt doesn't matter, because everybody's under the assumption that there's debt and then you get the debt paid back. And now that interest rates are so low, it's like, why would you buy any government bonds or any kind of debt from a corporation or city or a government if you know it's not never going to get paid back because they're printing so much that it's impossible to pay back? That can't continue. That's just like, how's that going to resolve?
I don't know. But I don't think.
Thankfully, we have Bitcoin at least.
Yeah, I think that you can hedge on your assumption and buy Bitcoin, right? Like that's the beauty of that. A lot of Bitcoiners have shipped it in and like bought all Bitcoin, and they've been rewarded for that. I don't know that their thesis on why the Bitcoin goes up is valid, but they've been rewarded for holding Bitcoin. I think that that's a perfectly reasonable thing to say about it. But like, I don't know that everyone's operating thesis here is correct. I don't know that like the government is going to collapse. I don't know that it's obvious that it's going to happen. I mean, I don't think the Treasury.
No, I don't think that. Like, do you think really many Bitcoiners think the government's actually going to collapse when they talk about the collapse of the dollar?
Yes,
because the dollar can collapse without the government collapsing.
I agree with you. You should tell it to other Bitcoiners.
I think that's pretty much what people think.
I don't think so. I don't think
there's a lot of people that think there's going to be anarchy on the streets and like.
I think you're very generous. I think that is exactly what most Bitcoiners believe, is that there will be like a giant collapse of government, and I see this a lot. Like, I have to combat this notion in Clubhouse or other places where people are talking about how like the government's going to collapse. Like, they say it, they predict it. They've been predicting it for years. That's why they're here.
I mean, the government was shut down for like 2 months when Trump was president, and nothing changed. The government collapsed. Even if the government collapses, nothing's going to change.
I mean, what might change is like if we end up in a weird like liberal versus conservative civil war of sorts, or maybe we're already in one. I don't know.
I think that episode has passed.
I do not.
No,
that is very naive. Yeah.
I mean, like, the censorship is working. They're censoring all the right-wing people and all the conservatives, so that, you know,
all that means is your thesis doesn't work, because like you're not seeing what the right-wingers are saying.
Yeah, I mean, you're driving the right-wingers into like dark areas where they can conspire together and like make plans in the dark rather than hashing it out in the open.
Or just have their conspiracies confirmed. Their conspiracy originally was that the government is conspiring to get rid of them. So the government has conspired along with big tech to get rid of them. And so now what happens, they're in the dark corner of the room, and you have no idea what's happening. I watch that stuff. I know what's happening. They're not gone. Okay,
but I agree with you. But I think that the fact that Trump was kicked off Twitter, and the media, now that Trump is not president, the media is like unable to talk about Trump 24/7 and talk about the upcoming civil war for boosting the ratings and selling ads. It's actually like net positive, I think, for the dissipation of that whole civil war like tension. I don't know. I feel it amongst all my circles. I feel it, man. Like, it was so tense.
Are you in the US or are you in Canada?
Canada is pretty much the US, man. Like, our politics.
It's so different. No, it is super different.
It was pretty vicious here, man. Like people were acting exactly the same on Facebook and Twitter in Canada as they were in the US. And even like in real life, like people are
I promise you, Brad,
and
it has not dissipated. But like my point is like if that sort of thing happens, then like, you know, Bitcoin's a good exit, right? Bitcoin's like it at least gives you like some of that it gives you some of like a little bit of ability to have that like sort of end of the world hedge. And I think that's a good use for it. But I just don't anticipate like much changing, you know.
Yeah, I don't think so either, man. I mean, the government is just people, and we're Bitcoiners, and the new generation is going to be totally digitally native, and they're going to like Bitcoin, and they're going to eventually be in the government. So it's like just a matter of time before all the government has Bitcoin. Like everybody that runs the country is also a Bitcoiner.
Unless government continues to be like 95-year-olds.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, unless they keep re-electing the silent generation to run the country.
Man, it is interesting though. Like this is it's a weird time. And but yeah, like I just tend not to think that like Bitcoin is going to like solve all the problems. I don't buy the like it's going to stop wars and whatnot. I do think the El Salvador experiment's a really cool one. I think I talked. I mean, I spoke to Tina the other day. This is his idea. I have to credit him, but essentially, I do think that this isn't necessarily like a Bitcoin play as much as people think. Like it does use Bitcoin. Strike uses Bitcoin, but like in a lot of ways, the Strike play is a dollarization play where, you know, these countries are going to be using essentially the dollar until they need to like, you know, revert to Bitcoin because they can leave the Strike app and put it on, you know, Lightning. And dude, and it's genius. I mean, if you think about it, what that allows, you know, Jack Mallers to do is, let's say the US goes after him, he can just change the denomination. He could say it's not dollars, it's, you know, Caribbean dollars, which are backed in dollars.
Yeah, it's whatever local currency they can integrate with, you know, with Lightning Network through RGB protocol or whatever. Omni, like Omni's working on a Lightning Network stablecoin layer too. I forget what they call it.
I don't even think that he needs that. I think that he could literally just change the denomination in the thing and just make it that. Like you could be.
It has to have.
Okay, like, fine.
I'm pretty sure the way that it technically works is that there is a stable coin that actually is riding on the rails of Liquid or Lightning Network.
Makes sense.
I think it's like you can, you know, it transacts in the fiat currency, but it settles in Bitcoin. And then you can also choose to use Bitcoin if you want to actually use Bitcoin. If you want to use sats on Strike, you can, but it's defaulted to whatever local currency that it is. And kind of like circling back to your comment before, which is like, we used to be saying we're going to disrupt all the banks and kill the banks and all that stuff. I mean, I kind of think that there was just like the argument in the early days that Bitcoin is a store of value or Bitcoin is peer-to-peer cash. Peer-to-peer cash.
Yeah, everyone like that
Bitcoin is.
It's just a meme.
It's like it can be everything. Like it can disrupt banks. It can force the banks to assimilate with Bitcoin. It can make people wake up to the fact that 0% like reserve banking is kind of insane and is likely going to destroy your purchasing power. So hey, why not use this hard asset? You know, like banks will assimilate with that, and you'll be able to custody Bitcoin in your bank or on your Strike wallet or in your own full node or on a cold card or whatever. So like back in the day, like Hal Finney was even talking about Bitcoin banks and stuff back in like 2010 and 11. They were talking about this in the early days.
I mean, we have a lot of this stuff now too. I mean, like I don't know. There's not that many differences between like a Coinbase and a bank, right? Like it's custodying Bitcoin. And basically Bitcoin, what's funny to me is that the Bitcoin infrastructure really does like just sort of slowly reinvent the entirety of the banking infrastructure. And I always find that very, very interesting that like Bitcoiners have basically reinvented the thing that they tried to get away from.
Yeah. And
it's a highly efficient system. It's a good system. We developed a very good system. There are flaws with it. Maybe the flaw is sort of the grease that moves through it, right? The money. Maybe that's the flaw. Maybe with Bitcoin, that fixes that flaw. I don't know. But like the rest of it, the settlement,
Well,
everything
although
else.
I would kind of have to push back though, because credit is kind of like, I feel like the credit system and the credit cards and all the usury that banks do is a social pariah, the same level of like Facebook and social media for young people. You get into a university or college, you're paying too much anyways, you're in student debt, and then you get preyed on by the banks to get these high interest credit cards. You're just like trained to go into this high interest usury debt cycle, and it's like stealing money from everybody from as
Yeah,
soon as
but
they're
Brad,
like,
that doesn't have to be the case, right? You could, for example, you can use credit for your own benefit. I do it every day. I mean, I literally have zero cash. I
yeah, but
only have
if you
debt.
think libertarians are dumb, just look at everybody else. Like, they're dumber than libertarians.
Well, but they don't believe that that the system's gonna crash and they're gonna be the
I
new
know,
oligarchs of society. It's very different, right?
they're literally the definition of sheep, right? They're just like out there watching Netflix, going to their job, paying
Most people,
20% on their credit
right?
cards.
Most people do not
They're-
have a sophisticated view of the world. Most people do not have like a deep understanding of how credit works and how efficient markets work and everything else. But like if you do, there's opportunity out there. And this is the
Yeah.
thing that's sad to me is like I love Bitcoin. I think it's great. But I think the democratizing tool for like bringing about wealth was created when Jack Bogle invented the index fund. I think that was the first and most important thing ever in a world where like you have the ability to earn money apart from credit and debt. I think that the index fund really democratized the ability to become rich. And people have not used it because they think that they're going to get rich quick, which is why people invest in Bitcoin and shitcoins. Like, I'm all for it. Like, invest in Bitcoin. That's great. Go ahead. But like, I am a strong believer in managing your risk, right? So invest in Bitcoin and invest, in the thing that Bitcoiners hate, equities, and invest in some bonds and invest in a little gold, something like that. And you'll have a portfolio that like is pretty strong against almost anything. But you can do that with debt. Like, again, I don't carry cash, right? So all of the money we operate on is in debt. Everything I do is debt.
Okay, so there's a bit to unpack there, because debt has changed in our lifetime. When we were in high school or even before that or whatever, it made sense to live by that old Dave Ramsey sort of pay off your debts, build up your credit, save your money in GICs and CDs and mutual funds or whatever. But since 2008, it's gotten so insane that that's totally flipped around now. Now it makes more sense for you to take as much debt as you possibly can, lock it in for as long as you can. Like, as an American, you guys have this amazing like 30-year fixed rate mortgage thing that we don't have here in Canada. Like 5 to 10, 5 is the most you can get, and if you're really lucky, you'll get like a 10-year fixed rate mortgage. But if you lock in a 30-year fixed rate mortgage right now, you should pile on as much debt as you possibly can get. Lock that in, because the interest rates are so low, and they're going to keep printing trillions of money. If we go,
but it's always been like that, Brad. It's always been like that. We like in America, we've had the 30-year mortgage since what, the 70s, 40s maybe. I think the 40s maybe was when that was developed in the U.S. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, and it makes more sense now than ever to lock your money into this, to take on debt and get a really long dated mortgage, because the interest rates are so low.
Why?
Well, because of inflation and the drop in the purchasing power of your money and the growth in the value of assets. You know that if, like, I believe what you believe, I think that we're going to continue to see sort of like the government retain power and the dollar is not going to completely die.
There hasn't been a growth in inflation. We've been in
I take issue.
Environment
I take issue with that, Sir Junseth. I think it's pretty obvious that there's been an increase in the supply of dollars and a growth in prices and a drop in purchasing power of your dollars.
Not really.
Yeah,
where
sure.
Where does it show up? Where does it show up?
This is my favorite game. Everything. I like when I was in high school, I remember the price of gas was like over half as cheap as it is right now. And 10 years ago, when I was mining Bitcoin in my basement, I was paying half the power rate that I'm paying right now.
My whole life, power has been about 11 cents per kilowatt hour. pretty much my whole
Well,
life.
I don't know if it's different in Canada, but my power's doubled in the last 10 years. And my house has doubled.
Not, yeah, but that's not inflation. In 10 years, your house has doubled?
Yeah.
Okay, so you have seen an average increase in your house of 7.2%. So
Yeah,
that's 3.2%. That's 3.2% more than the average growth of a house. Houses grow on average of 4%.
Yeah, most of it though is, but we're talking about, that's a significant. So first of all, that's a significant percentage when you're talking about long time frames and compounding. An extra 2 or 3% is a lot.
It is, but I'm just saying, like, you're talking about a 10-year period where your house grew only 3% more, 3.2% more than the average growth of a house. So, like,
sure, but most of that came in the last couple of years. Like, it's significantly more. It's probably up like 40%.
Probably the last year, right?
Last year, it's probably up about 20%, and the year before, probably about 20%. It's kind of been weighted to the last couple of years.
That's what happens with assets, by the way, is they fluctuate. Some will spend 10 years stagnant and then suddenly grow. I mean, this is actually what happens with gold. Gold, like, does nothing for 20 years and then pops. And, like, it's not an example of inflation. Like,
well, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious when you compare, like, the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve with the total supply of money, with the growth in assets, the growth in value of assets. There's obviously some things like chocolate bars that aren't, showing up in inflation, and they're trying very hard to keep the things that poor people buy from inflating in value. I mean, they're really trying hard to keep that stuff down.
There's not much else that, like, has inflated in value. Like, what else has inflated? Like I like this discussion because, like, you're not going to be able to find much that has actually, like, hyperinflated in any way.
No, I'm not saying hyperinflation. I'm saying
inflated beyond 2 or 3% even, right? So
no,
like,
I would definitely disagree with that.
Let's go through it. Like, where do you see inflation?
Well, like I said, my power bill has doubled in the last 10 years. My house price has doubled in the last 10 years. That's more than 2 or 3% a year. That's, I don't know what the math is. 10%?
7.2.
How's it 7.2 if it's doubled?
It's 7.2% over 10 years. I promise you.
Okay, let's do the math on this live math lesson, because I would assume that's like 10% or something. So how do we do that math?
I mean, you start it at the price it was and multiply it by 1.072 and do that 10 times, and you'll double the value you started with.
Oh shit, I'm doing this wrong. Isn't there like a thing I can click?
Well, it would be what? Is it 1.072 to the 10th or whatever? But you'll just have it double.
So why isn't it 10? I guess compounding.
What do you mean? It's compounding. It's 1.072%. That is
okay. 7%. Okay, so 7.2%. That's high in my opinion. That's really high because
houses grow at an average of 4%. So it's not that much. You're talking about a delta of 3% increase over the usual, and that's only for 10 years. And there's other things that have not grown that much. Most things haven't grown that much. Most things have not doubled in price over the last 10 years.
Things that haven't grown that much are
price of cars.
Price of car definitely hasn't doubled. It's gone up for sure, but hasn't doubled. It's probably regular inflation.
2 to 4% per year.
Yeah, probably 2 to 4%.
Okay.
What else?
Price of a tuna can. Price of a tuna can.
Food prices are way up here in Canada, anyways. Like milk and cheese and meat
for the current time because of the pandemic. Like there's very obvious reasons for
that. For the last few years, the price of things like dairy and
it's been that bad. Like you're probably talking de minimis.
I'm not talking about hyperinflation. I see.
But
there's a
Brett,
difference.
I'm just saying like the key here would be that you would need to demonstrate that there's inflation and that there are not that salaries are not rising with the same sort of, at the same click. And salaries are in fact rising at exactly the same rate as inflation.
Well, I also don't agree with that.
Salary, it's just true. You can look at like the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. Like I've never understood this. These stats are all available, and like the only presumption that people make is that the government lies.
But
that's fine. But like it's not very helpful as a heuristic.
No, when like I'm looking at these numbers and I see when it's been a few months since I looked at these charts, but from what I can remember, you see the wage gap is increasing because people that are like executives of public companies, their salary is increasing by insane amounts, and the workers, their salary is increasing by a really small amount, and it's just keeping up with inflation barely.
Median income increases
Of
about
the
the same rate too.
of the CPI index, though, and especially
Me-
government jobs, like government
I'm just
jobs.
saying median inflation increases at around the same rate. So it's just not valid. Like median inflation increases at around 4%. Mean inflation increases around 4%. Your mechanism for
I don't
why?
know, man.
Go look.
My cell
It's
phone
stats are
bill.
available.
My cell phone bill has doubled in the last 10 years. Like, there's a
Canada
lot of
might
things.
suck. Canada kind of sucks. I mean,
It
like
sounds like
in the US though, my cell phone bill's gone down, like way down. Like
See, that's different. Like, I'm experiencing something different then because a lot of my shit's going up a lot. Like,
you guys, I mean,
okay,
maybe Canada should stop printing money, and the US should do it.
commented a good thing. LED televisions
There you go.
have gone down.
That's actually a very good
sure.
point, and in fact, that's actually the case with most people. Wage growth versus productivity growth.
Computers are much cheaper today than years ago. That's not
100%.
true. That's
it's
not
absolutely.
True.
It's absolutely true.
No way, not a good computer.
Absolutely is.
If you want a top of the line MacBook, you're going to pay like $6,000 or $7,000 for a top of the line MacBook.
How much?
MacBook.
Okay, but how much more is in there than was in there 10 years ago?
Right, which is
crazy.
Right,
it's like
yeah, the price of a shitty computer is way down. Like
you can buy a shitty computer that's way well. No, but Brad, do apples to apples. Okay, take a computer that existed 10 years ago and take that same computer and buy it off the shelf today. You're going to spend.
Oh my god! Of course, that's cheaper.
$8
you spent $5. Yeah, that's great.
We're not talking about that. Wait, you ever used a Raspberry Pi?
Yeah, no. Well, I'm not talking about like I'm not talking about that.
Like my dad purchased a computer that was as powerful as the Raspberry Pi in the 90s, and that thing was $3,000. So like, I can buy a Raspberry Pi for $32.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because that's the power of technology.
But
it drops the price.
This is my point. When you have these anecdotal, like sort of examples of things that you're paying more for today, and you look at the past and the history, like it doesn't really work because there's plenty of things that have gone way down in price. There's plenty of ways in which our quality of life have increased.
Yeah,
a great example. When you were a kid, how many phones did your family have when you were a kid?
Oh, I definitely didn't have any cell phones.
How many phones did your family have when you were a kid?
One phone, two phones, three
Where
phones.
was it? On the wall?
Yeah, phones in
the
house.
You might have had four phones.
Like cordless.
If I called Brad, all of them would ring, right? So you have one phone.
Yeah, one line.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Are you married? Do you have kids?
Yep.
Okay. How many phones do you have today in your house? 8. Yeah. Okay. So I think we have identified why your phone bill has doubled. I mean, it's absurdist. Like,
I'm factoring my own line, not like all the lines I have. I'm just saying my line.
We've got this trade. We make a trade off, right? We trade off things like convenience and other such things. And like phones now, like back in the day, my parents probably paid up $60 to $120 in 1990s money for their phone line per month. Today,
right?
I have 3 phones for $120 a month.
Okay.
Or $100 a month.
So I'm not arguing that like technology doesn't drive the cost of things down. I do think it's kind of wrong to say that there's no inflation because when
I didn't say there's none, but like in the last 10 years, I think
there's high inflation. I think there's high inflation. It's not as high as like Turkey, which is at like 25% a year.
Where is it showing up? Like, do you have categories, places? Because I like, I'm sure there's inflation, but I don't see
hamburgers, fast food restaurants, my milk at the store, cheese, cauliflower, my energy, gas. So there's a lot of things that have doubled.
So a lot of these things, like this is an important point. A lot of these things have substitutables, right? So for example, beef may have gone up, but chicken probably hasn't increased quite as much. Pork is
obviously if you want to like,
but that's the argument. That's the argument. Substitutables are an economic, an important economic concept where you can like say, well, price of beef has doubled, so I'm going to switch to chicken.
Yeah, well, I mean, for sure, when I was a kid, the price of like a microwavable pizza is pretty much the same relative cost as a microwavable pizza right now, or like a pizza pocket, or a strudel, or some kind of like
Dude,
Kraft dinner or something like
yeah.
that, or mac and cheese or whatever. That all that like cheap poverty food is still around the same cost. There's not really been much inflation in the cost of like cardboard food that you can get, and just to sustain yourself on empty calories, factory produced garbage food, you can definitely eat that
So,
if
so
you want.
your spec level on what you're willing to consume has gone up. That's good.
Yes. And so I
Okay.
started I
But
started
that's
eating
that's not an
healthy.
example of inflation. That just
No,
means
well
that
when I
you are
well when I
spending more because you are eating better.
well no when I started eating healthy was probably 10 years ago. I've noticed a rapid increase in the price of meat, specifically good quality meat and good healthy food like yogurt and cheese and um, other healthy foods. I can't think of them right now, but
But are we talking about like 50 cents, over the course of that time? Like what are we
I mean,
talking? Because
salmon. If you got to go get a piece of salmon right now, it's like $20 to get a piece of salmon. That's crazy.
I doubt that, but it might be like
Well,
2 pounds. Yeah,
I'm
like
using
10, was it
Canadian
$10?
dollars here
Yeah,
too, by
yeah.
the way. But I definitely think that people that are saying that the currency is going to hyperinflate are hyperbolic.
Hmm.
But I also think that it's not true to say that there's been no inflation. I think it's like, especially since 2008, but especially since 2019 and on, since they started printing like crazy, you can feel the drop in value of purchasing power, like especially in real estate and things like that, where like asset values have just been going crazy. So your wages aren't keeping up
Again,
with asset values.
in some places, Brad, like for example, I can buy an apartment on the Upper West Side of New York right now for like 1.2 million, maybe even less, like
Yeah, that's
700,000. I
insane.
see some of them going for.
That's
Do you know what they were
crazy.
for pre-pandemic? 2, 3 million. Like it's just not true. Like in some places where the supply or where the demand is high, yeah, housing
Mhm.
prices are going up. But in other places where demand is
Well,
low, like
why
in
do you think
cities,
why do you think though, if you don't think that there's inflation, how do you explain the flight from cash into assets like real estate and Pokemon
well, I
cards and
didn't say
Beanie
I didn't.
Babies and all that stuff?
Well, collectibles are a different thing entirely, and like I don't understand why economists confuse collectibles so often. But like I don't think I think people buy things that they want for the most part. Like there's this presumption that everyone is some sort of sophisticated investor. People like to collect things; it's a thing they like to do, and they like to collect things that make them money. They like assets that go up. Cash is not a great savings vehicle; never has been. The government
Well, it used to be.
targets inflation. No, it wasn't. The government targets inflation.
No, back
They've
when
always targeted inflation.
yeah, but back when there used to be like an actual interest rate that you could earn for being in the market, then it did make sense to pay off your debts and save your money because you're at least earning something from it.
It didn't. It didn't make sense. There's never been a time when like you couldn't sit and do an equation and figure out whether it was better to pay off your debts or not. But like people should have all like debt is a good vehicle, at least in today's economy. Like in a Bitcoin world, debt is very hard. Like you can't really do debt. If hyper Bitcoinization were a thing, you couldn't really do debt. But in the modern world, like debt is a really nice tool. You can use it to turn a little money into a lot of money. And you can argue about
Well,
the cheapness of that debt,
the
and I think
edge
that there are
cases can.
problems.
Most
It's not the
people
edge cases. It's the
can't.
majority of people can. You get them. You articulated one. Getting a mortgage. Most people can
Yes.
get a mortgage.
Yes, that's easy, right? Like, but most people don't have the ability to like leverage debt to invest properly unless they're doing just like
Well,
get a
I don't think
house.
that's true. I think most people don't know how to invest properly, but they could if they were told about index funds.
Yeah, but even index funds, like that was a rabbit hole I went down too, like 5 6 years ago, because I started to have some money and I was like, okay, well, I got to diversify out of Bitcoin because I can't be all like 100% in Bitcoin. This doesn't make any sense. I got to get
Mhm.
some real estate and I got to start looking like how do people invest. And actually, it was 5 years ago. It was before Bitcoin went up. It was Bitcoin still like 300 or 400 bucks, and I was like, I was pretty confident Bitcoin was going to go high, because of what was happening with the economy and with debt and with
So Brad, make a quick
value.
prediction. let's say you had put your money into an index fund 5 years ago. How much value do you think it would have gained in those 5 years?
It would have been a lot. Probably doubled. Probably would have doubled in 5 years.
It did a little better than that, yeah.
Because I wouldn't have. I mean, I did go into a little bit of index funds, but I was thinking like, I'm going to set up myself with like the passive indexing strategy for like a percentage of my portfolio so that I can just think about it for like, not think about it for until I'm 80, you know, or like 70 or something, and just go into the index and hope the system doesn't fall apart, because they can't let it fall apart. And then if that happens, then that's my hedge against Bitcoin. Like a 5% of my portfolio in index funds is like my hedge against the system falling apart. Because if the system doesn't fall apart, then the index fund is going to be huge. It's going to be worth a lot of money.
Yes.
And the entire population is dependent on index funds not falling apart. So they have a massive incentive to keep piling money into it and changing the rules so that it benefits the index funds and the banks that are got everybody's pension and retirement funds and state funds and everything in there.
You can invest in that tragic situation that governments put us in.
Exactly. So yeah, you can do that.
Funds.
So I do agree that like.
But Brad, if you had indexed the market since like the 20s, which you couldn't have done because the index fund hadn't been invented, but let's say you did that, on average, the market would have grown about 8% or about 9% per year, 9 to 10%.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
you would have doubled your money every 8 years, and you would be a multi-billionaire today.
There's a story that Tony Robbins talks about in his book, Money Master the Game, where there's this guy that was like a FedEx driver, and he just made a regular working man salary, and he started like from, I think, when he was like 25 years old until he was 70. When he retired from FedEx, he was like basically 50 years of indexing, just taking like 10% of his check and putting it into an index fund, or I don't know if it was an index fund or it was an indexing strategy. I think it was like managed by the company or something like that. And anyway, he ended up putting in whatever the math was. It was like a couple of $100,000 or maybe $1 million or something like that over the life of his whole career. But he retired with like over $70 million because of compound interest and the massive gains he was getting. And he's just a regular guy working pretty much a minimum wage, middle class job for his whole entire life, ended up retiring with nearly $100 million just by being in the markets and never touching it. So, I mean, that I do agree that indexing is a great strategy, but I don't think it should be I think that's extremely risky in today's day and age to put a significant percent of your net worth in index funds, because there's a fundamental risk to the whole system that wasn't there 50 years ago, 20 years ago. Before they started doing quantitative easing, it made a lot more sense from a risk perspective, but now I feel this
is a libertarian trope. Like quantitative easing, I was told by libertarians, is going to bring the system down, and they unwound it with very little trouble.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that a lot of us got wrong in 2008 when we were thinking like, oh my God, they can't just print money and the stock market's not going to crash.
Well, but obviously, that's because you fundamentally misunderstood what was going on. You thought it was printing money, but it was somehow different than printing money, right? That's my point, is like, there's a lot of things that are going on here. Like libertarians in particular, for some reason, view economics as like this stagnant sort of practice, a stagnant sort of science. And it's not. Like economics is a pretty new field of study. And there's a lot of things that they do nowadays that like they just didn't know they could do before.
I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't think
I know.
No, listen. They had to bail out the banks. They had to print the money, because if they didn't, it was going to blow up the entire system. It doesn't change the fact that the banks took too much risk and were pretty much defrauding the entire population by creating these synthetic derivatives and then creating derivatives on derivatives and then stuffing it all into pension plans and like making the population.
Oh, it bothers me that nobody went to jail.
But that doesn't mean that it's not money printing or that it's not negative.
It's not the same. It's not the same as money printing. I mean, like there's some like money made on seniorage and stuff like that, but it's not like exactly money printing. It's different. They can unwind it much more easily.
Okay, but they don't though. They don't
unwound QE. They absolutely unwound.
No, they don't. No, they didn't. They
tried. Look at the graphs. They absolutely did.
No, they tried to. And then in September 2019, when they tried to reduce the base money supply and tried to actually get the Keynesian, because I agree that like Keynesian versus Austrian is not real because we're not in a Keynesian system. Keynes like advocated for saving money when there's good times so that when there's bad times, you can deploy the money into society and get the economic cycle going. We never did that. We just continued to put money into the cycle even during the good times and didn't save any money. And so all these corporations now, they need to meet these targets of what the pension plans need. The pension plans need to make like 6 or 7% a year in order to stay solvent, to meet their obligations. The Fed targets 2% inflation or something like that to try to, well, I don't know what reason. Why do they target 2% inflation? Why would they want to target inflation?
Well, because then you can make
stimulate
investments. You can make investments based on like the net present value of what you hold. So you can actually do the math and figure out whether investments are a good idea or not. They could do it would be exactly the same thing if they targeted 2% deflation. The point is that like they give you a number so that you can essentially plan. The reason the government likes to inflate is to encourage you to put your money into places where it works, like equities.
Yeah, but it's still kind of
if you're
strange for me to.
If you're so worried about inflation, put your money into tips. There's actually a product whereby you lose no money in accordance with inflation.
How does it make sense though? Because I never really thought deeply about this. It just was something I never looked beyond the surface of, like the Fed targets 2% inflation. Why do they have to target inflation? Why can't they just let inflation? Why can't they, like we talked about, the price of computers has gone down, the price of cars and TVs and chocolate bars and stuff has gone down. Why can't they just let technology and natural like increases in productivity and new inventions and stuff like that? Why can't they just let that drop the cost of things without having to target inflation and pump money into the system?
Well, they could also target 0% inflation. It wouldn't matter. The point is that like money wouldn't be a great savings vehicle if they targeted 0% inflation. It doesn't really matter if the inflation is small, like 2% or 3%. Like at least you can plan as a business, as a person, as a company, whatever. Like you can plan for the fact that your money is going to lose a little bit of value every year, a small amount over the course of about 72 years at 2% inflation, you're going to lose half of your value. All right. So you can avoid that by investing it. You can put it in Bitcoin. You can put it in equities. You can put it in bonds if you want. You can put it in gold. You can put it in any number of things, right? You can buy Beanie Babies and baseball cards and Pokemon cards.
Okay, so you're saying you're and I've heard this argument before, that the reason why they're dropping interest rates so low and targeting small inflation is so that they encourage people to invest money rather than hoard money. And that
I don't know if that's the case. I think that the Fed has largely viewed interest rates as ineffective in culling economic growth or retraction in recent years. And they're confused as to why they've lost that control. They don't know why. Now, maybe some people think that they know why, but interest rates have not been hugely effective in moving economies recently.
Well,
there's a lot of really good academic papers on this, and
this is different. This last year is different because there's also like a real black swan sort of shock with them shutting everything down.
Correct. But Brad, what happens if all this money printing happens, right? And you don't see this inflation? What happens now? Like you didn't see it during QE. So again, your heuristic was that
I feel like we did. I feel like we did see huge inflation. I feel like when you saw the price of gold start going up in, what was it, 2007 or 8 or something like that, after the initial drop, the inflation happened on the Fed's balance sheet of base money that they were printing plus assets that they were putting on the balance sheet, like the TARP money with all the mortgages and stuff like that.
So to that example, Brad, how would you have avoided inflation in that scenario? How would you have grown your money?
I think
there's one answer based on what you just said. So what would you have held to have?
You mean as an investor or as a central banker?
As an investor.
Oh, well, as an investor, it only makes sense to go into assets.
Well, you would have held gold because it went way up.
Gold or the stock market, like an index fund or something like that, for sure.
Yeah.
Or
So you could
Bitcoin.
have
Bitcoin would have been
you
good
could have held
after,
Bitcoin. You could have held gold.
2010. Bitcoin would
Yeah.
have been good, but that's an edge case.
So this is actually my point, is that like the way that I think of investing is like I invest in everybody's ideology. I look at everyone's thoughts and I try to find a decorrelated basket of goods,
Right.
of assets and commodities.
Yeah.
And I invest in those things so that when the Fed does something that makes gold go up, I benefit. And when the Fed does something that makes equities go up, I benefit. And when a pandemic hits and equities drop, I can buy more. And when equities go way up, I can sell them and buy some Bitcoin. And that's, I manage my portfolio that way for the purpose of always being in the thing that could possibly go up.
Okay, I agree with you on that strategy, and I personally do that as well. But I have a much lower weighting, I imagine, than you into stocks and index funds and stuff like that. I think I'm only like 5% or something of my total portfolio is in the stock market, because I really do think it's extremely high risk, and I know that the government is incentivized to make sure that the party keeps going at a manageable rate that keeps the thing in the structure of a healthy market. Whether it makes any sense at all, it can go up for 5 years and then go down a little bit and sort of range and then keep going up. Like, that's their target. They just want it to be a healthy uptrend and step in when the bottom starts to fall out with whatever they can possibly do, with stopping the markets, banning shorting, printing money, lowering interest rates, Fed repo overnight window, just like piling money at the system, whatever they can do to stop it from going into a depression. And I think we all benefit from the world not being in a depression. So that's net positive. But I think it's an insidious tax on the middle and lower classes that they're printing so much money.
It's mostly a tax on foreign companies.
Well, okay, so
that's where the most dollars are. They're held in foreign corporations.
Sure, you're exporting your inflation away to the holders of the debt, who are China and the other countries.
Well, also like foreign national companies. Like when we inflate, we as Americans reap the most benefits. Now,
well, okay,
that's just the reality.
Like, yeah, well, okay, rich Americans get the most benefits.
Even poor.
I don't know. Like the benefit that the poor people get is that they're not going into an economic depression, but they're not gaining. Benefit. Yeah, it's a benefit, but they're not gaining any kind of value like at the pace that the wealthy class is getting. Like
it's not true. Government benefits basically increase at a COLA. They do a cost of living adjustment for almost every.
Sure, yeah, benefit. Especially now that they're moving into like straight on UBI experiments. Like the lower classes are going to actually get some benefit of it. But I mean, you can look at the charts and you can see that the average person doesn't have much savings anymore, and the average debt.
They never did. They never did, Brad. Ever.
Well,
the generation with the most savings, by the way, is, I believe, Gen Z and millennials. Believe it or not.
I don't think so, man. Because I've seen studies too, or not studies, but like, economists on Twitter with their tweet threads or whatever, as long as you can trust those charts, showing that previous generations had much more wealth as a percentage than our generation at our age. It was something like a 5x reduction in savings. And you can also see it in that millennials and Gen Zs and stuff are getting married later and they're buying houses later, and
you can't. No, not true. Millennials are the generation with more savings than any generation previously. They have more savings.
Are you talking about as a percentage of total wealth or in dollar value?
In dollar value.
Yeah, well, that makes sense though, because the dollars are shit. Like, dollars a shit coin. So of course, like anything from 50 years ago, if you're going to measure the dollar value of someone's bank account. How many more
people are retiring early because of like index funds today than they were 20 years ago? So many more.
Yeah, I would say that's true, because we didn't have Reddit back then with the fire like strategy, but at the same time, I think the data shows that a lot more people back a generation ago were more entrepreneurial. Like they were.
I'm sure that's true. And
they were retiring from those types of things rather than retiring from investing.
It's just no. People were mostly like people relying on pension funds back in that generation. That generation had a lot of pension fund reliance, and it was hilarious because their pension funds paid out, but then bankrupted the companies.
Okay, but why would the meme of like the American dream now is like get 3 jobs and
Because
and
people are
then
stupid. Because
throw it into
people
the
are
markets.
because people are stupid liars, and they're not. It's not a true. That's not a true indication of what's actually going on in the U.S. or anywhere. Frankly, no one has 3 jobs in the U.S. People have one job. People use that job to make money. Sometimes people have a weekend job where they like drive a FedEx truck, but it's pretty much everybody's got one job, and they are lying, and they're living with their mother, and they're saving money. And the millennials have more money saved than any other generation. And this bullshit about them not being able to buy a house, completely
Okay, you're
false.
gonna
They
have to
could.
tweet. You're gonna have to tweet that at me.
I
I'd like to
can't.
see.
I'm banned from
Well,
Twitter.
oh, that's true. Yeah, you've been censored. Well, send it to me on Telegram or something. I'd want to look at that. I'm actually interested in that because everything, all the data I've seen, and I'm writing a book on this right now, so I don't want to be putting out false information because I'm including this in one of the chapters of the book. Because the way I've seen it so far, it's like it's not an insidious plot or something by the banks to like enslave us with debt, but it's just incentives for banks that have no recourse and that have no risks to make as much money as possible by getting people in debt as quick as possible and as long as possible and just harvest them as profit meat for their whole entire lives.
I'll tell you. I'll tell you what, Brad. Like I think that we have this weird problem generationally right now, where kids think that delayed gratification isn't. It doesn't matter, right? Gen Z and millennials, I think,
I
suffer
agree
from this
with
great.
that. I agree with that.
And this idea that they were owed houses in their 20s is bullshit. They weren't. That was like one generation of people did that. The generation before them did not. The conditions like go read like Cat on a Hot Tin Roof or something like a Streetcar Named Desire, and just think of the conditions that they're describing in New York, right, when they're living in their apartments. We live in a very different society, and there's really no difference between renting and owning. This idea that you are owed a house is absurd. And all that prices do in a society with a deep market like rentals and owners and housing is that they continually become more and more close to equivalent. So renting has become more equivalent to owning a house. Meanwhile, millennials love to complain that they can't own houses because they believe houses are what, and I quote, the biggest wealth generating vehicle of the previous generation. All right. You cannot simultaneously believe that houses are the biggest wealth generator of the previous generation and that they should be affordable for you. Because if they were the biggest wealth generator, they will certainly be too expensive for you. However, the claim that they were the biggest wealth generator of the previous generation is a falsehood. Houses increased at around 4 to 4.5%. The previous generation overconsumed houses. They bought too big of houses for their families. In the 50s, the average home was about 850 square feet. In the 90s, the average home was something like 1,400 or 1,600 or maybe more, 2,400 square feet. If you do the math on the average per square foot of a 1950s home and a home in the 90s, you will find that they are exactly in line with salary increases over that exact time. Exactly.
Okay, so that does sound like good logic, although I do still think that it's not just a difference in generation. I think it's a huge part of why that's caused is the way that the central banks and the commercial banks
But Brad,
prey on the generations.
well,
Like,
no, because if houses are exactly the same price today as they were in the 50s when measured against actual like salary growth, then you haven't seen any inflation there. You've seen basically like houses are the same price. It's
I
just
would
that
like to see
we've begun
that.
over consuming.
I'd like to see that data. I've never thought about it like that before, that the price of a house is basically like the same portfolio slice as it used to be when you just take away the dollar value and just look at square footage to purchasing power. Like if there's a chart that shows purchasing power and like compares it to a house and compares it to gold and you don't see a large increase, I'd love to see that. I'm very skeptical that that's what it would look like. I mean, my hunch here is that banks are predators and they prey on dumb young people that don't have the financial education to know that they shouldn't be taking high interest student loans, high interest credit cards, and they shouldn't be getting, like, as it was happening in like 2008, like low income people were getting no credit check mortgages, which caused even that was pretty nuts.
All because of government policy, not because of the banks.
Government
the banks
policy and banks,
that.
because the banks
had to obey the government policy. They were required to give those loans out.
Okay, but they weren't. They were giving, like, people were giving getting bonuses for signing up clients. So the salespeople, it's just like Wall Street derivatives brokers and stuff. Like, all those people that work on Wall Street, same as mortgage brokers, if they're going to get a bonus, they're just incentivized to go sell as many as they possibly can. It's like any sales job. So, I mean, if you're a derivative salesman and you're going to make $1 million selling a toxic asset to a pension fund, you're just going to do it because you're going to make $1 million.
Sure. Incentives are misaligned. I agree.
And I think it's the government, the central banks, and the commercial banks
required them to do that. And guess what? We had a big crash, housing prices adjusted, and now we're back to those same levels.
Okay, so that's the thing. Like, I feel like, yes, the people that thought that the stock market was going to crash, in the end, they were proven wrong, because we didn't have a central bank buying up the toxic debt of the commercial banks before and printing money to give to the banks that caused the problem and the bailout companies that were going under, like the car companies. So we just, everybody thought, like, oh well, this doesn't make any sense, so let's get out of the stock market and go into gold and invent Bitcoin as an alternative sound money, because Occupy Wall Street had no effect on anything. Like, it didn't seem to have any effect. So Bitcoin was released as like a protest to this corrupt system of printing money to give it out to people.
Yeah,
so
I think that's all valid.
But so what I think is that if you had to put money in the same thing, like if you put money in Bitcoin in 2011, or you put money in the stock market in 2011, actually you were taking less risk. You were taking about the same amount of risk, I think, when you fast forward it out.
Chance. No way. You're taking way more risk on Bitcoin. It
depends on how much. It depends on how much you put in.
Brad, it's not about how much you put in. It's about what the risk actually is on the money that you did.
Okay, let me talk through this though, and you can give me your opinion on it, because
Bitcoin had no users, so there's no reason.
Yeah, I know, but hold on, because I was in Bitcoin in 2011, and I bought Bitcoin because I was like, screw this. The banks are scamming everybody. They're bailing everybody out. Like, Occupy Wall Street's doing nothing. Ron Paul's getting censored by the mainstream news, and like, he's got a sound money message that nobody's listening to. So I'm just going to say, screw this. Frig the banks, like frig the central bankers. I'm going to buy Bitcoin. This is my protest vote, and it's exciting, and it's digital cash, and the guy's anonymous. They can't shut it down. So it was like all those things. But at the same time, I was taking a little slice too and putting it in index funds, because I realized that even though against my own like political views and activist hatred of banks, they're incentivized to make that shit go up for as long as possible for infinity, because it's the freaking dollar, and it's the stock market, it's the retirement, it's the pension funds. They can't let that go down. So I put money in both. And obviously Bitcoin did way better.
Way better. Yeah.
Stock market did pretty good.
Well, but Bitcoin did better, but it doesn't mean your thesis about why you did it was correct.
I think I was taking risk doing both things. I also bought some gold.
Bitcoin is an asymmetric risk, right? And if you're young, I don't think it's stupid to ship it in, right? It's an interesting risk. It's asymmetric. Like, it has asymmetric returns. You put a little money in, it turns into a lot of money, possibly. And I think that's a really cool investment for young people. It's a rare opportunity, and Bitcoin's a new type of commodity. It really is. It's a new thing. It's like the discovery of oil, and I'm all for that. Like, I think that's all very good, but I'm just saying, like, it wasn't less risky. There were like 8 people that used Bitcoin back in the day. But you couldn't have known that Bitcoin was gonna work.
Like,
just like me, like I couldn't have known. I thought we were going to take the government on. I thought that's why we were here, and we weren't. Like,
I didn't think
that's not what it was for. Yeah, I did. Our theses Our theses were probably both very wrong, but we ended up getting very lucky. And if you see it as anything other than luck, like you're mistaken.
I mean, I saw it as digital gold. I was buying gold and silver, and then the guy that I was watching on YouTube that was like teaching you how to like find the right silver to buy like in bulk. It wasn't a lot of silver. It was, just a hedge amount of silver, but I still wanted to get it like as cheap as I possibly could. This dude was also like, oh, hey, and by the way, there's digital gold. Did you hear about Bitcoins? And he's like talking about spelling it wrong and like, the old style of talking about Bitcoin. So to me, it was like all those things at once was like, man, this is amazing. This is libertarian money. It's also an exciting technology. So I don't really know what the hell I got involved in it for. I love the idea of peer-to-peer money. Digital gold, all of it. So it was way more risky then, but I think when I'm looking at now as somebody coming in, like what should you invest in? I think it's more risky now to invest in index funds than it was 10 years ago. And I think it's less risky to invest in Bitcoin than it was 10 years ago.
Well, I think a lot of people agree with you. So, but for me, I do the way I do it because I think the system is going to remain basically unchanged.
But the risk is much higher now, though, that the stock market, that they can't keep doing this. It's much higher. It's not like it's like 50%, but
that's what you think. No, I mean, like, who knows? You might be right, and your thesis will be proven out over the next 5-10 years. I don't think Bitcoin going up is just necessarily a proof of that thesis, but like, maybe it is.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think that Bitcoin going up necessarily is a measure of like the failure of stocks and everything. It's just it can grow to $10 trillion as an asset without eating into the stock market.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's all great. I think that you and I are both on the same page about that. But like, I know there's other things you wanted to talk about, and I don't want, at the risk of boring everybody about this, because we're not going to. I mean, like, I've said everything I need to say about like how I invest and think about it.
Well, the chat was going pretty good. I didn't get a chance. Like, there's a lot of people. Oh, no, go on.
Listening. Keep going. Then keep going.
So look, people seem to be enjoying the rabbit hole.
Doesn't matter to me. We'll do the rabbit hole.
I think we're pretty much done.
Way more nuanced than a simple disagreement. Kramer to follow. Okay. Yeah, I agree.
Contrarian rabbit hole. Those are my
Everyone
favorites.
says that, but I'm not a contrarian.
You're a contrarian in the Bitcoin scene, but not in
Bitcoin.
In the real
I'm a contrarian. Yeah. In the real world, I'm a contrarian too, only because I love Bitcoin, right? So like, I'm a contrarian on both sides, but not. Why does Junseth think Bitcoin is going up? I mean, Bitcoin is going up because it has a lot of utility. And more people are discovering it, and people need Bitcoin. And they find out that they need Bitcoin when their entire hospital is ransomed. And that's why it's going up. People discover that they need Bitcoin because, it's a decorrelated asset from the rest of the, assets in their fund. And they need something else in there. People need Bitcoin for all sorts of reasons. Grandmas need Bitcoin because their pictures get ransomed. Drug dealers need Bitcoin because they can't get their money confiscated when they're arrested. All sorts of people need Bitcoin, and gamblers need Bitcoin so that they can gamble in overseas markets without having to call Pedro in Mexico and have him take a vig. There's a lot of reasons Bitcoin goes up, and the best use case of all, a lot of men need Bitcoin to hide money from their wives. So there's a lot of really good uses for Bitcoin, and Bitcoin will continue to go up as those uses are discovered. A Swiss bank account in your pants. That's a pretty good example of why people need Bitcoin. Are you in control of when these like chats show up? Because I'd love to see them.
That guy's laughing.
He should laugh. It's funny.
I am. Yeah, I can highlight them. They're coming in every few minutes. We get one. This guy wants to see the data on the chart. This guy had an interesting thing when we were talking about the housing. Price of a house equals how many labor years to acquire. That'd be a good stat to look at.
I don't think that's interesting, because like you can it depends on where you buy the house and all sorts of things, right? If you're going to buy a house, an average house somewhere, and you want to compare it to like an average house in the 50s, then you're going to have to look at an 800 square foot house compared to an 800 square foot house today. And what's going to happen is you're going to have an even number of years to acquire that same asset. Now, if you're talking about a 2,400 square foot house versus an 800 square foot house, you're going to have 3 or 4 times as much time that you have to work to acquire it. That said, We have a 5% down norm in the United States, 3% if you're doing FHA loans. So if you want to buy $1 million house in the United States, you need to put down $3,000. Well, that might not be true because maybe I think FHA have to be conforming loans. So, but you can basically buy a, what is it, $528,600 house or something like that for 3% down.
That's like going 100x on FTX.
Yes, it's highly leveraged. It's a very, very, very cheap amount of money.
Okay,
so like when millennials tell me they can't afford a house, I mean, what is it like? If you buy a $500,000 house at 5% down.
Okay, well, hold on. So
$25,000.
Here's the thing that I think about as just a normal person perspective. There's in my neighborhood, there's like they built like an extension on behind my neighborhood. It's just a normal middle class like suburban sort of neighborhood, and the houses are going for ridiculous amounts of money over there. And you know, for my area, I mean, it's not like New York prices or anything, but say like 800,000 or something like that for a house. And in Canada, we have a similar thing. You know, we never had the housing crisis in Canada because we never had the easy credit that you guys had. Like, it's always been pretty conservative here. You have to have at least like 5% down. The lower your rate goes, the more you give. So they do like, you know, you can't have a house if your credit is more than 50% LTV or whatever. You know, like you can't have a too high of a debt load. They won't give you a mortgage if your debt load is too
That's
high.
very similar here. It's like 28%, I think, though, is like your income has to be like 28. The monthly prices costs have to be like 28% of what your income is.
Right. So it's pretty conservative. So we never had the problem here, but obviously we were affected. Everything that happens in America affects Canadians. But anyways, the housing market's going nuts here. They're selling houses here for like $800,000, and the people that are buying them are just regular middle class people. Like they're not super rich. Like this isn't a rich neighborhood. It's just a regular like middle class town. And people that are buying these houses are just like teachers and stuff like that. And I'm like wondering how people are affording houses like this. And this story is all across Canada.
And there's two responses to that. Number one, many of them can't afford that house.
Yeah, it is. That's what it is. Like people are just maxing themselves out on debt.
Number two, people are making the biggest mistake of their lives. When you buy an $800,000 house and you make a small amount of salary, you will never be that FedEx driver. Try it. You can do a weighted average cost of capital equation. It's very simple. And find out how much that house costs you compared to putting it into the market or into Bitcoin over the course of your lifetime. If you buy that house when you're like 25 or 30, you're going to basically straddle yourself, cut your ability to earn wealth by 75%.
Yeah,
over the course of your life.
You're destroying your compound interest opportunity by
you're losing about 6% per year.
And which doesn't sound like a lot, but over 50 years, that's millions of dollars.
Yeah, it depends on how much you're going to win.
I mean, if you're just like a regular person, if you were to leave it,
Brad, if you had not bought that house, the money you would have otherwise had would have doubled every 12 years.
But at this point, it's kind of strange because we've gone to unprecedented levels of low mortgage rates, and it's starting to kind of like flip a little bit, because if we know that the government is incentivized to target 6 to 7% a year growth in the stock market for the retirement funds to stay solvent, and we know that they target inflation, which now they are just going to continue printing money. We know this is the only thing they can do. They have no other option if they don't want to see a recession or a depression happen. They have to just keep the same thing going or make it even better. So it's almost a guarantee that by taking a mortgage out now, in 30 years, your house is going to be probably millions and millions of dollars if it's a $600,000-$700,000 house right now.
There are no guarantees. Your best bet, if you want to earn money in the current system, is to take a broad-based index, put your money in it, at which point the cost to buy a house becomes is something that you have a time preference for that is infinite. You can buy a house today at these prices, or you can buy it in 15 years at exactly the same amount of money that you like in terms of relative wealth.
And you're
if
saying
not
rent
more.
until then?
Well, you can do the math on where you live and
I
figure out
don't
what's
know,
cheaper,
man.
renting or
I don't
buying.
know. That's a pretty risky equation because you're taking if your scenario of index funds continuing to go up happens, it's only because they're injecting money into the stock markets, and
That's
that will
one thesis,
also.
and I disagree with it. Like the house is a much riskier bet. The house is unilateral or what is systematic risk, right? It is a single point of failure, right? Which we cover a little bit of that with insurance. Insurance definitely prevents a lot of that, but unilateral risk is a systematic risk. You can diversify away. Unilateral risk, I think, is the risk that you can take on that you can profit from. So when you're taking a house and you're investing in it, you're basically saying that like you are going to give up the ability to diversify away the risk, and you're going to put it all into this one house. And that's why there's such liabilities.
I don't know if I agree with that though, man, because if you're in the house and things continue to go up in the stock market, it's because they're printing money and all assets are going to keep going up and your house is going to keep going up. And then you can just remortgage the house and invest that in, it's because the interest rates are going to continue to be low. Because listen, if the housing market crashes, we're in a depression. If the stock market crashes, it's because we're in a depression. There's nothing else that can happen unless it's we move to a post-scarcity world because the aliens come and give us free energy or something like that. And even then, there's going to be an economic depression for a little while until we figure out how to deploy this shit and people start going back to work because they're like, oh my God, aliens. Whatever would happen. Like if the world that you think is going to happen is that things keep going and they just keep pumping the markets to 6-7% a year, it's also going to be pretty much a guarantee that the house price is going to be going up a lot too, because it means that smart investors are seeing that the dollar is losing its value and they're going to continue to use, like Tina always says, they're going to be using real estate as as a store of value, which it's not supposed to be. It's meant to be a utility for you and your family and like to live in. But people are
But
continuing to
like,
buy real estate as an investment.
people can state that they're buying real estate as an investment, but very few people actually make money on it. So it's a bad investment.
But I don't think
Like,
they're making money.
it doesn't matter.
But they're not
It doesn't
thinking
matter
about
what
it
people
as
say
making
they're
money.
doing.
They're thinking about it as a store of value, like
Risk you can real quick. Risk you can diversify ways called unsystematic risk, which is just to clarify on points.
So you're talking about, but I believe that like buying house, you can have unsystematic risk because you
cannot.
I mean, in the world where we're up only, where prices only go up, then
It's not how prices
remortgage.
work. You literally cannot have unsystematic risk in a house. It is the definition of unilateral risk.
Okay,
Like,
you're right. You're right. You're right. It's definitionally wrong. I'm
if
just
you
saying.
if you wanted to, I guess you could like make your house. You could throw it into a portfolio of REITs of similar houses like yours, and then you could diversify away that risk and just make your house part of that investment. I suppose you could do that, but you cannot diversify away the risk of the water pipe in your bathroom breaking.
Oh, well, that doesn't count. That's like
it absolutely counts. No, these are not edge cases. That is what the risk is of a house.
No, we're not talking about maintenance.
It's literally you are. That's what you're talking about with a house.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about macro picture. Like housing prices are going to go up if stock market goes up. You know what I mean? Like
the reason that housing prices are a bad bet is because you're losing your value degrades over time as a result of the maintenance and other things that are involved in the price of the house.
But that's the same as paying the 1% fee to the mutual fund company. It's like you're losing some money.
So you can do the math on which one's better. You can do, like I said, a weighted average cost of capital, and you can make all of the assumptions and figure out which one will generate the most income. And the most income is almost always in diversified portfolios.
Sure, yeah. You shouldn't have 100% of your net worth in a house.
You should have as little as possible. And again, you can do the weighted average cost of capital equation.
But I don't agree, man. I don't think you should have a lot because the risk now that we have. This is the maximum risk at this point. It's uncharted territory for the stock market because all throughout the last 100 years of the the continual bull market of the U.S. stock market, even during the Great Depression, or not the Great Depression, but after the Great Depression, like during the 80s stock crash and like 2008 and all the different recessions we've had. It's, if you zoom out, just like Bitcoin, it's just in a continual bull market forever. So yes, that happens. And you have to acknowledge that. If you're a skeptic of the stock market, you have to acknowledge you've been wrong pretty much every step of the way, because the stock market only goes up. But at this point, the fundamentals are not there. And that's why I do think it is a risk more than ever, because the ratio of
libertarians tell me that for the last 30 years.
Because the ratio
it's moving the goalpost, Brad.
No, okay.
It's been moving the goalpost for 30 years.
Okay, wait. Forget about moving the goalpost and whataboutism and all that stuff. Just listen. I didn't finish my point. So the PE ratios of stocks right now are at the highest levels they've ever been, and the concentration of the S&P 500 into the top 5 or 10 companies is at the highest it's ever been. Combine that with the central bank's reserves being the highest they've ever been, and the debt to GDP ratio being the highest it's ever been. Even back when the war was going on, we've got a higher debt to GDP ratio than then. Everything is stressed to the max, and we're on the precipice of changing money completely, like entering the next phase of the experiment.
And that is why I advocate for the best new shitcoin, Vanguard Total World Index, and not the S&P 500. You should get a broad-based portfolio of the entire world's corporations, so that you can invest in all of the world's best and stupidest governments, so that you can benefit from companies going up. And VT is the best shitcoin ever made. VT.
So what percent? Okay, so that makes it a little bit more. I mean, listen, if we go to Bretton Woods 2.0 and we all the countries agree that debt doesn't matter anymore, and it's kind of a relief of, not like a debt jubilee where everybody's debt's forgiven, but more like just going forward, a new paradigm about money and UBI, and like allowing maybe some deflation. Because now it's not like the stock market isn't fundamental right now. It would take 100 years or even more for some of these companies to make the revenue that their stocks market caps are trading at. And obviously we got the rise of this phenomenon of meme stocks and stuff. So Warren Buffett sold his airline stock after the pandemic, and retail scooped it up from him on Robinhood. Like, all the retail traders came in and bought all of his bank stocks and airline stocks. It's totally a different phenomenon that we're in right now. It's kind of actually reminiscent of like back in Germany, Weimar Germany, when most people were subsidizing their income with foreign currency exchange. Like 10% of the population was just doing forex currency trading.
It's pretty simple. Retail traders are dumb. They're going to have a few good years in a bull run here. Yeah. They're going to enjoy it, and they're going to tell you that Junseth was wrong and that retail traders are not dumb. And they'll spend a lot of years gloating about it. And then what's going to happen is the economy will take a turn, or their stock specifically will take a turn. And then you'll hear nothing of retail trade for a while. And they'll disappear like they never were around. And they won't apologize to Junseth or anybody who said that they're dumb.
So what do you think? What do you think it looks like to take a turn?
Well, I mean, I think that you could see a 40% drop in stock markets from time to time, which for me is a great opportunity to buy.
For how long do you think that would happen?
I mean, would recessions happen every 5 years or 10 years or something like that?
I mean, we all thought that this was going to be after March 2020, when COVID kind of was reconciled into the markets, into the stock prices, and everything dropped and oil went negative and all that crazy stuff happened. That was the start of a recession.
I didn't.
No, I mean, there was a bunch of people that, I mean, I bought the bottom too. I bought a ton. I bought a ton of stocks right at the bottom. I actually did too. I didn't buy. I put like another 1% in or something. I accelerated my dollar cost averaging into the stock market. When everything dropped, I was like, against my activist sort of viewpoints and my hatred for banks and the stock market and all the risks I think are there, I'm just going to put some in my retirement account because they're incentivized to keep it going and save this. So I want to participate. Obviously, I'm like in Bitcoin. That's the majority of my net worth is Bitcoin. So I'm benefiting from any kind of hedge, gains there. But I do agree with you that most people should have some of their portfolio, especially in the tax advantaged accounts, like in index funds, low fee index funds. Make sure you're not getting screwed by the fiduciary that's going to take too much fees off you and eat into your compounding. And yeah, just put it in your Roth IRA, or if you're Canadian, your tax-free savings account, or your 401k or whatever, if you're Canadian, RSP, and just never take it out. But I do think that people should not put a lot of their net worth in there. I mean, I think it's extremely risky to have faith in the government and the banks that they're going to be able to continue this craziness. Maybe they will. I mean, it would suck if they couldn't. The world wouldn't be great. You know, it'd be a lot of suffering.
It'd be real bad. Yeah, there'd be a lot of suffering. So,
but there is a lot of suffering now with the system and the way it is. It's not fair.
There really isn't. To the poor people. Really is very little suffering. I don't know, man. Suffering. Where's the suffering?
I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot of suffering in like a lot of the low income neighborhoods. Like,
yeah,
you know, you can see it. You can see it.
Yeah.
Well, not just that, but like that's another thing too. I think between the drug laws and the central banks, that's what causes most of the suffering in the Western world, in the U.S. and Canada.
I think that those things are problems, but there just is not that much suffering. There really is not.
There's not as much.
In America, poor people have cell phones, they have giant TVs on their walls, and they have food for every meal. Like it is such bullshit to think that is suffering. And what we call suffering is people who have less than you. That's bullshit. There is not much suffering here. It's very, very, very good.
Compared to 100 years ago when people didn't have running water and power or anything like that. Yes, for sure.
Power, there's less suffering. Water, it's generally clean. Like, you know, sometimes there are blips in the system. Flint, Michigan's a great example, but there is such little suffering in America. Such little. And anyone who tells me otherwise is dumb.
I don't know, man. I think the amount of, maybe it's not directly caused by central banks, but I believe that the government and the central banks and the commercial banks all have an incentive to keep poor people poor, and they do.
Well, then why did they allow the introduction of index funds? Because that does the opposite.
Okay, but hold on a second, because that's for rich people.
No, it's not. Anyone can invest in index funds.
But I know, but
anybody.
You're
even
not
you,
taught,
Brad, even you.
But you're not taught in school to invest. You're taught in school to be on time, to memorize your thing, to be a good soldier, like be a good soldier bee or whatever, so you can go work in a factory. And then
I hope that changes. I hope that we revitalize.
I know, but I'm just saying
education in the American medical or the American school system. But that's not insidious. It's just something that's disappeared.
Well, what is insidious though is people are not given a proper education. Then they get out of school in these inner cities and these low income areas, and they have no opportunities. But yes, they have technology, they have TVs and cell phones and Facebook and shit like that. But
they have the same opportunities you have.
So people hustle, and they get thrown in jail and they get harassed by the system. And there's way too many people in prison in the U.S. for nonviolent drug crimes.
They have the same opportunities you have, Brad. Same opportunities.
Yeah, but there's definitely a negative weight luck.
Yeah.
You know, to the people that are born in those areas.
It's not luck. It's that they're born there and they're told that that if they're succeeding, they're a problem.
But if you're born
in culture in those places.
Nah, but that's majority caused by the printing of money. Which,
how can you possibly know that?
Let me tell you, because if you're born into an inner city and your father is in prison for selling weed, you're just already screwed. And the central banks are printing money, making the rich people richer, and you're not benefiting from that. You're just stuck in this rut. You're stuck in this vicious, like, systemic problem. And meanwhile, these like companies now are just making like companies in states that it's legal. There's like factories of like rolling joints basically now legally, while what is it, 800,000 or something people are in prison for doing the exact same thing, and that needs to change. Like for sure, that needs to change.
It sounds to me less like it's money printing that's the problem, and access to courts that's the problem. If you want to change that, start a voucher system for legal fees. Like you're not talking about money printing. What you're doing is you're taking this thing that you care a lot about, which is money printing, and you're applying it as a veneer to the entirety of your worldview. And that's just not helpful.
Okay, listen, but I think it's not directly related. I think the drug laws are a totally separate issue that does have a relation in that it's not a free market. It's a libertarian view in the end. That's the reason why I think I link them together, because it's like the same as war. It's like an anti-war, anti-drug law, inflationary money, like
I'm with you, by the way, on the drug stuff. Like it's funny to me to go back to the 90s and find out who was for it and who was against it. Like I love the American political ethos is to say that the right was very pro drug war and that the left was not. But go back. A lot of this stuff was created by Tip O'Neill and Charlie Rangel and these others. There's a great debate in the early 90s between William F. Buckley and Charlie Rangel, where William F. Buckley is basically telling him exactly how the drug war is going to go. And he's being told by Rangel that he's wrong. Rangel, who is a giant advocate of the drug war. And now today, I have to hear people complain and tell me that the drug war is an affect of like the right, right? Mm-hmm. But these are laws that really are mostly the problem that I would say we have in the U.S. and probably Canada too is access to courts, right? It's not so much access to like money. The government provides huge problematic incentives on in terms of what do you call them? Benefits to poor people. Like there's bad incentives there in terms of not allowing people to base subsidies and whatnot that prevent people from making good decisions. That rewards single motherhood rather than like 2-parent households and whatnot.
So high bail is a problem in a system of money printing, in a system where people are stuck in an economic
How is that related to money printing?
Because it's all related to control. Like money printing is about control.
High bail is something that a judge decides.
I know, but these are all things. These are all things that are designed.
Brad, wait. Look, essentially the claim is that a judge is like, okay, well, we've been printing money for a really long time.
No, it's not about judges. This doesn't come.
No, it is because it's bail. So like
it's systemic though. This isn't like one judge.
You person in front of me, obviously, because we've been printing money for so many years, have the capacity to like pay $1 million in bail. So I'm going to pass a high bail because of the printing.
No,
of money.
It's not millions. No. It's like hundreds or thousands in some cases. But that doesn't even that is too much.
The best you could say about bail is that bail has a robust credit system around it. And that has maybe the result of easy money, but almost certainly not. It's probably the result of people with bad credit risk having to be bailed the majority of the time. Like I don't know what you're paying. Well, for no,
the way that
you're probably paying 18 or 19%.
The way that I understand this bail problem is that the bail is not extremely high. It's just high enough to make people just do a plea bargain and just go to jail for a little bit of time, because if they can't afford the bail, they're gonna have to go fight, and usually they're gonna get a shitty lawyer.
People plea because they're gonna go to jail if they don't.
Like, yeah, right.
You're talking about access to courts. If you want to solve that problem,
but the plea
build a system of legal vouchers. Give people the means to pay for a lawyer.
Right.
Change the system of public defense. Sure. If it's not a money printing issue, not all things are solved by printing money or not printing money. You can change it.
Because I didn't get to finish my point about the money and how it's connected. And maybe you'd think I'm wrong. But I believe that the government and the central banks have an incentive to keep people from really looking deeply at how the money system works. And I believe that
it's a conspiracy, man.
Well, most people...
You can read a book and learn.
Most people don't realize that... Yeah, you can read a book and learn, but most people are, I guess, put into a system of entertainment and distraction and kind of like fighting over politics or fighting over blah, blah, blah.
So question, is your belief that if everyone knew that how fractionalization works, they would pull their money out of banks? Is that sort of the thesis?
My thesis is that if everyone realized that the Federal Reserve was not a government corporation or a government entity, I mean, it's a private corporation run by the banks, which has shareholders.
Not really.
Yeah.
No, it is
Yeah,
a private corporation, but it's not really run by the banks.
It is run by the banks. The president only gets to nominate the head of the Fed from the 12 Federal Reserve board, like banks. You can't just choose someone to be the head of the Fed. It's like, here's 12 bankers. Choose one of them.
I believe he could literally choose anybody.
No, it has to be from the 12 federal.
Does it?
Yeah, it has to be from the 12 banks. So it's like, it's a show. It's like, oh, well, here's 12 bankers for you to choose who runs the bank. That's not connected to the government. And it's not, I believe that if people knew how the Federal Reserve wasn't owned by the people, then I think they'd care about that. And I think if people saw how, I don't know, if that corporations are getting bailed out and taking too much risk, and central banks are bailing out the systemically important banks to the tune of trillions of dollars, I do think that if they really understood that and saw the disparity in the wealth gap climbing, like the Gini coefficient of the US dollars increasingly worse every year. And I believe if they saw that yeah, they'd be freaking pissed off, and they'd be directing all the rioting, like the Black Lives Matter riots from the left, and then the Mickey Mouse insurrection or whatever from the right. Like all that shit is all just like people are angry. And I believe that it would be directed at the Federal Reserve and the central bankers if they realized how the system worked.
I think you're wrong about who the president can appoint. I think the president could literally appoint his mother to be Fed chair if the Congress voted on it. I'm fairly certain of that.
The Congress would have to change the laws.
I don't think you're right about the law on this.
I mean, I have
to go get a plug for my computer. So
I'm pretty sure
quick start looking.
Most people are shocked when they learn this. So I'll Google it again.
I'm pretty certain you're wrong.
Maybe someone in the chat can Google it. Can the Federal Reserve, what am I Googling? Can the president appoint anyone to Federal Reserve as president? I don't know how many people are watching this, but thank you for staying with us this long. We didn't get to talk about Ripple or Dogecoin or NFTs.
We can't. I'm used to 3 hour long.
Yeah, I might have to go. I might have to go to the bathroom, but
you can do that. I am ambivalent to the length. People, someone said the other day, I did a podcast, and they said, "Oh, 3 hours confirmed." Junseth podcast. All right. You know what's funny is I had the cord right here the whole time. All prepared. All right. We're plugged in. You looking it up?
Yeah.
Can the president appoint his mother as Fed chair? I think that should have been the Google.
So it's
just kidding.
The bank can the Federal Reserve board, the board of governors,
nominated by the president, right?
No, the Federal Reserve Board of Governors creates a pool of Class B and C directors, and then they create the chair of the committee of the Federal Reserve Bank Affairs, meets, creating a broad and diverse group, whatever. Then they give the final candidates, and they formally appoint a candidate, and then I guess
2 things.
President chooses.
I'm looking at Wikipedia, the most reliable source on the internet. Appointment process. As stipulated by the Banking Act of 1935, the president appoints the 7 members of the Board of Governors. They must then be confirmed by the Senate and serve 4-year term.
Let's check that wording.
And then second, conflict of interest law. No member of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System shall be an officer or director of any bank, banking institution, trust company, or Federal Reserve Bank, or hold stock in any bank, banking institution, or trust company. And before entering upon his duties as a member of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, he shall certify under oath that he has complied with his requirements, and such certification shall be filed with the Secretary.
Okay, that's too much. It says the nominees for chair and vice chair may be chosen by the president from among the sitting governors for 4-year terms, subject to Senate confirmation.
But I believe that board is also put together by the president. So my point is, I think anyone can be nominated. Generally, you want only qualified people. The reason you end up with bankers in the Federal Reserve is because bankers are the people that know how to run banks. So you want bankers to run banks, or economists to be on the Fed, right? Not necessarily like your mom.
Right.
So
yeah.
again, like it's a pretty non-corrupt system as I see it. That's pretty good.
Well, I'm gonna have
Seems
to look
less corrupt
more.
than you thought.
I gotta read more into that. If he could appoint his mother, if the president can appoint anybody,
then it's a good thing, right?
Then it's better than only appointing from a list given by the Federal Reserve members. But I'm gonna have to look into that one more, because I thought I did a couple times already. But yeah, I would actually feel a little better about that if that was the way it worked. But it still doesn't really change the fact that the people don't. But I guess, you know what, like the problem, but the problem of the Federal Reserve used to be that the interest rates were so high that the interest rate paid on the national debt was significant. So income tax was going to, like back in the 70s and 80s and stuff, the income tax was, majority of it went to pay to service the national debt because the interest rates were much higher. And that was a big problem for a lot of people back that were critical of the Federal Reserve System, because pretty much like half the income tax, or I think it was actually 100% of the income tax, was given to the Federal Reserve, and interest payments, not just the Federal Reserve, but just people who own government bonds. And the Federal Reserve owns a lot of government bonds because they buy bonds from the Treasury. They basically give that's how they print money. The Treasury issues bonds, right? And the Federal Reserve creates fresh money and buys the bonds. So it's pretty much like the Fed creates money, but they also get bonds. And then when the interest rates
created in the banking system, though, right?
Yes, the majority of the Federal Reserve creates base money, which is like the seeds of money, and then when it's put into a bank, it through fractional reserve banking and the money multiplier, it can go up to 10x the amount of money through somebody depositing it and then taking a loan and then depositing that money, and another loan is issued. That's fractional reserve banking is really another big problem, I feel like, with the unfairness of the money system.
I don't think you think that.
Well, okay, so but
do you want to know why I don't think you think that?
Back to the Federal Reserve first, because the problem used to be that the interest rates were so high, but now the bonds are paying pretty much negative real interest rate. Mm-hmm. Bonds are the lowest interest rate in history.
Let me hit on the Federal Reserve thing first, though, Brad. Libertarians love to complain about the Federal Reserve stuff, not Federal Reserve, the fractional banking, right? But if you think about it, fractional banking is the state of nature. It is the thing that you don't have to regulate away, right? If you don't do regulations, fractional reserve is the thing that will crop up, right? Honest banks will fractionalize.
Hold on, Junseth. I gotta go pee. We've been at this.
Go do that.
You can talk to this guy for a second while I go pee.
The chair is nominated by the President of the United States from among the Board of Governors and serves a term of 4 years after being confirmed by the United States Senate. Yes, but the question is who appoints the Board of Governors? And I believe that is also the President. The President appoints the 7 members of the Board of Governors. So that's the Banking Act of 1935. So those governors are actually appointed by the President as well. So he could put anybody. I believe they probably have to be appointed or approved by the Senate, but he could appoint anybody to be on the Board of Governors, including his mother, as far as I understand. I don't see why he couldn't, other than he would lose reputation, right? So I wish that I could actually see these comments. I don't know exactly where I can. Let me look. Facebook. I'm actually going to go look. Brad. Yeah, Brad's taking a pee. So he's definitely at an advantage with being able to see your questions and such, or your comments. I am not able to see them. Probably go and look at this though. I know that he tweeted this. Here we go.
All right. Did you guys resolve things or what?
Well, his comment is correct, I believe, but what he's leaving out is that the board of governors is also elected by the president. So that's I think the crucial point is that the Federal Reserve Chairman
this person saying the nominees must already be members of the board.
Yeah, who were appointed by the president. Banking Act of 1935, according to Wikipedia,
from
most accurate source on the
members
internet.
of the board. So the chair is nominated by the president from among the
As are
members of the board.
Yeah,
but
and the members
nominees
of the
board, the nominees must already be members of the board,
which is nominated by the president.
I got to look into this when I'm not like on live and I can go down a rabbit hole because I mean it's hard to really get to it here, but I'm pretty sure I've gone down this. Maybe I've been miseducated by like libertarians or something like that, but like I'm pretty sure
they love to do that.
Well, look, I don't want to be spreading any false information, so I'm going to have to revisit this sometime because it is important to know the truth about how the chair of the Federal Reserve gets elected. And it does seem more fair if the president can nominate anybody, but it doesn't really change the fact that it's interfering, like they're interfering with the free market, and that the people aren't really getting the benefit from any of the benefits of like the Cantillon effect or the money multiplier or any of that.
I tend to agree with you, but I don't know if you've thought about this, but that argument is an argument for UBI.
Yeah, and I'm not a full-on libertarian. Like I'm Canadian. My wife has a rare disease, and
UBI
I benefit
is a libertarian
from
idea.
UBI is libertarian?
Oh yeah, it was like in the modern era, it was really the biggest proponent of it was Milton Friedman.
Whoa, okay, wait a second. So Milton Friedman, I thought, was a monetarist, not a libertarian.
Well, it depends on what definition. If you're looking at modern libertarians, they probably reject him, but I would have called Milton Friedmanites libertarians.
I for sure he has libertarian streak to him, but I thought in terms of economic policy, he wasn't an Austrian economist type of guy. I thought he was a monetarist, which is kind of like a Keynesian, but
the thing is, like, libertarians in the modern day have bifurcated any semblance of like cogent thinking on economics and have rallied around a single economic idea rather than understanding that economics is sort of a holistic practice and study. So what happens is people that I would have considered libertarians, like Milton Friedman, are no longer considered libertarians because they don't comport with modern libertarian ideas, even though that is where a lot of, like back in the 90s, libertarians would have been quoting Milton Friedman.
Yes, and I think I've definitely heard that, like, people talk about how Milton Friedman had like libertarian views on certain things. I think he was like against the drug wars and stuff like that too, but not from like I think drugs are good perspective, but just I think that people shouldn't be thrown in cages for entertaining themselves and stuff. But on a money point of view, he wasn't an Austrian, so he definitely had more like progressive ideas, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, when it came to the money. Like he thought more like a Democrat or liberal or whatever. I don't know what you want to say, like a progressive, I guess.
I don't think so.
In terms of money policy?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think he was just more holistic. Like, I think even Mises would have been more holistic, as would Hayek. Hayek was a much Hayek credits says one of the most important economists ever was Keynes. So like libertarian ideas are cute, but they throw out any work that was done pre, like, you know, they throw out a lot of work that is important in the study of economics.
Okay, but you're talking about a wholesome view and like a nuanced view, but you know, even like we said earlier, Keynes didn't, like we like to say we're in a Keynesian system, so therefore Keynesianism doesn't work, but we're not in a Keynesian system because
Correct.
Keynes didn't recommend 0% reserve requirements for the banks, and
Correct.
he didn't recommend spending money in bull markets. Like he was okay with some helicopter money, but not continually, like turning the spigot on 11 and just leaving it run and just overflow the pool forever. So we're not in a Keynesian system, just like we're not in a capitalist system. We're in a corporatist system.
I tend to agree with that.
So I would say that, like, if you're going to look at it holistically, I still think that net central banks interfere with the free market too much, and they cause the wealth inequality to go up. And while we may not have as high inflation as some of us think, or maybe even I think, I definitely think that inflation in the money supply is extremely prevalent and obvious. And
But
the loss of purchase
statement than inflation, right?
Okay, but we're talking about wholesome, right? So like the loss of purchasing power is for the
De minimis.
dollar is going. I think it's extremely high.
Tiny.
No, it's not, man. Come on. You can definitely if you're going to talk about like the dollar as, if you're going to take the side of the argument that the dollar should be an index fund, that would be a de minimis for sure. You're going to gain a lot. Like if you use the index fund of the economy as the dollar, then you would have a de minimis.
No. You don't use the index fund as in the economy as a dollar. An index fund allows you to increase purchasing power. If you want to know the returns, on average, you get 9%. If you measure them against inflation, you're growing at between 6 and 7% per year, right? So an index fund gives you 6 to 7% more purchasing power over holding dollars. So that's why you hold them.
Yeah, but the purchasing power of the dollar is going down significantly year over year.
Nobody holds dollars.
Well, because the majority of the population doesn't have much of it.
They could if they saved.
The middle class has
Brad,
less
you gotta realize
dollars. They have more debt than ever before in history.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean they have less dollars. I have more debt than my father, but all my debt's very, very low, and I use it to make more money.
Well, if you yes, but you're smart. You're an edge case. Like if you believe that I mean, if you look at the purchasing power of the dollar over the last 50 years, it's definitely going down significantly.
It's not.
It is, man. You can't deny that.
You're talking.
So if you want to, if we go
50 years, that means that it has decreased by about 70% in terms of its purchasing power, right? If you held the dollars, but nobody holds dollars.
Okay, but that's what a lot of people who had money.
Nobody held dollars. No, they didn't. They put it in the market.
Well,
very few people hold dollars.
No, that's not true. Like most people, and it was apparent, especially after COVID, that most of the people that were not that were in the market were already wealthy people that have like financial advisors and stuff like that. Like most people just go to the bank and the bank sells them on like a GIC or a mutual fund or something. And it's like the bank's own product and they have high fees and they're getting barely 1 or 2% a year growth on that. And that's the most, like, I think the significant majority of people that have enough financial sense to think, well, I guess I should save my money rather than spending it on, instant gratification stuff or gambling it on Robinhood. But I'm pretty sure at least that's what the headlines say. Maybe the headlines are wrong.
55% of Americans own stock.
Yes, but the percentage of the Americans that own the stock, like 55% do. And I'd say so that right there, half don't, which is a lot. That's a lot of people. And I imagine it's mostly middle class and lower class people that don't. And then the percentage of wealth that's in stock is probably majority owned by the top 5% or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So
and yet, Brad, you still have to answer for the fact that poor people have big screen TVs, cell phones, and food every day. Right?
A lot do. Yeah.
Everybody. There's
No, I mean,
there's nobody starving in America. I
there
promise you
is.
that. No,
There's
there's
like the
not.
tent
No,
cities and
there's
stuff
not.
that's
There
happening.
is not. No, that is bullshit.
You don't think that
McDonald's
there's
has a
tent
dollar
cities?
menu. They're not starving. McDonald's has a dollar menu. For $1, maybe two, you can get all of the calories you need for an entire day. Good
Dude,
calories? No, but they are not starving.
When is there a dollar menu? There's no dollar food here
There's
in
a
Canada.
dollar menu, my friend.
we don't have any dollar menus here anymore. That's like 10 years ago. That stuff's gone.
Yeah, you can go get a double a McDouble for, I think maybe it's more than $1 now. It's like $1.99.
That's inflation, man. That's inflation, 100% inflation.
You just said 10 years ago, so that means like $1.99 from $1. Like, we were astounded when they got it down to $1.
I don't think that's a good. I don't think that's a good.
You can get 2 cheeseburgers for like $1.
Yeah, but I don't think that's a fair assessment to say that there's no hunger.
Perfectly fair assessment. There isn't any hunger in the United States.
That's like saying there's no inflation.
There's no hunger in the United States. I will stand by that.
So there's no hunger. There's no inflation.
Well, there's very little inflation. It's de minimis.
Maybe where you live, man, but there's people that are going hungry.
No, there's not.
Yeah,
that's a lie. It is not true.
There's documentaries about it where there's like kids are going to school without lunches, and like
they're obvious lies because you can go get a McDonald's hamburger for like $1. It's an obvious lie.
What if you don't have $1?
You can stand outside of McDonald's for 10 minutes and get one.
Okay.
It literally, Brad, there's no hunger in the United States. I hate to say it.
Okay, but
I'll be the bearer of truth. People can tell you there is. They're liars.
I don't know. I don't think it's right to
then you're not being reasonable. You can buy a whole.
How did we get on this topic?
For like $2 to $3.
How did we get on this topic of hunger?
I don't know. Like, I think it always stems from like inflation is a big problem. You're trying to say that inflation causes these things.
Well, wait, we'll go back a minute. We were talking about the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. Then we got to like there's no hunger in America. Through talking about economists and UBI and Milton Friedman. And then I was saying that if you use the Vanguard Global Index Fund or whatever,
as the stock market, there are poor people that can't put it in.
Yes, so
there we go.
I mean,
found it.
Okay, now we're gonna do a prostate exam. I don't know if we can do that over Skype.
You can do anything over Skype.
Here we go. Hold on, let me change my background.
I'm putting a latex glove on for those listening to the podcast.
So
there really isn't. There's no hunger in the S. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to disappoint.
I don't know, man. We're probably gonna have to like pick this back up because I find it really hard to accept the idea that there's no inflation and no hunger. I think that's crazy. I mean, it's
unreasonable. It's unreasonable to believe that there is hunger in the U.S.
I mean, if we're comparing it to the Depression, yes, there's not as much hunger by far. There's more people that are living with power and running water and education, but it's not like solved. There's still homelessness. There's still
completely
drugs.
Solved.
It's not. There's still like people. There's still 800,000 or more people that are basically like slave laborists in the prisons in the United States.
Yeah, those are problems, and that's an access to courts issue. You tie it up all. The problem is, Brad, that you tie everything up into this idea that money printing is what causes bad things. And what I'm trying to tell you is, I think it's control.
I think it's control.
It's not. It's a problematic view of the world because there's actual solutions to some of these. Like if you want to solve Black people being put in prison, which is a very good thing to solve, you should advocate for access to lawyers, not like less money printing. That doesn't solve that problem.
You should actually, I feel like you should end the drug war and legalize most drugs and let everybody out of jail that was a non-violent like offender for some sort of nonviolent drug crime, like let them all out of jail, give them some reparations for like ruining their lives, invest in these inner cities that have had generations of this been happening now, and hold the Democrats accountable for putting all these 3-strike policies and militarization of the police in. But none of that shit's going to happen, unfortunately. So the banks have something to do with this. Banks have like redlining policies where if you're in a certain zip code in a certain inner city or whatever, you're not going to get access to credit. You're going to get
not. They used to. They do not. They haven't had
not
that
anymore.
Since the 70s.
I know, but that stuff creates cycles, and it creates negative cycles. And combine that with the drug laws, which prey on minorities and ruin families and ruin the generation of families. Your dad's in prison. You're now like going to be put into this vicious cycle of like selling drugs or something. It's going to be hard to get out of that. And then combine that with
so put fathers
money
back
printing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like
but that's not money printing. Money printing is not the problem.
No, but you combine that with money printing and manipulation of the markets, and it's leaving
There's
these
no such thing as market manipulation.
Setting interest rates artificially is market manipulation. It's not a free market. Bailing out corporations and banks is not a free market.
Prices adjust. It is exogenous to the market.
No, but they're not. That's why we're seeing 100x PE ratios, because the risk is not factored in.
The difference between our ideologies. I believe fully that the market prices that stuff in, and that
what market though? It's a fake market.
If houses, if mortgages are low interest, right?
Yes.
I believe my thesis would be that housing prices will go way up.
Right.
Is that reasonable? Okay. And if mortgages are, if mortgage rates are high, yes, my thesis is that housing prices will go way down.
It depends on what happens with the money supply.
It doesn't. So here's my question to you. In my scenario, when is best to buy a house?
What you laid out two scenarios.
Should you buy a house when mortgage rates are high, or should you buy a house when mortgage rates are low?
You should buy a house when mortgage rates are low and they can't be raised, because it will cause a depression.
No. You should buy a house when mortgage rates are very high.
If you're in a free market.
There are aspects of the market that are not free, but we're relatively free.
They can't, like, they have to keep the interest rates low.
The Fed doesn't set mortgage.
Okay.
Mortgage interest rates.
Well, let's flip it around for a second. Going forward, what do you think could happen that could allow interest rates to rise back to a normal market dynamic, 5%, 10%, something like that, without causing a depression?
So I reject the premise.
And inflating rates.
Right. I reject the premise that those are normal, and this is not normal. Like, I think that we are in a state of a different normal.
Well, okay.
I don't think that it's necessarily worse or better than the previous normal.
Talking about a free market, though. I guess we have to caveat.
Someone has to, like, setting rates is one thing, but it depends on what you believe setting rates does. I believe that setting rates adjusts prices, right? But it adjusts.
I think it adjusts
with your ability
risk.
to. It doesn't really. It adjusts prices commensurate with your ability to pay. So, like, if you were buying a house pre interest rates being this low, you might have been able to afford a $500,000.
Okay,
house.
You're talking about mortgage rates. I'm talking about like base rates, like central bank rates.
Okay.
Because banks are encouraged to take on more risk. So combine low interest rates, artificially low set interest rates, with money printing and the Federal Reserve being the buyer of last resort. You basically have risk taken off the table.
If you really want to talk about risk, if you want to talk about risk, I mean, like 0% reserves, I think, is a very dangerous precedent. I think that's dangerous.
Yeah, that's the third pillar of all this nonsense and fake value.
But to me, that's the only pillar that matters. 0% reserves is a very scary prospect.
Okay, put yourself in the shoes of Goldman Sachs or something. You know that you have no interest on your money. Like, you can borrow money for free, and if you screw up with your bet, the government's going to bail you out. How is that? Exactly. That's not a free market. That's corporatism. That's like
No,
private
that's not true.
banks.
It's the banking taking risks, banks taking risks, and government bailing them out. I mean, like again,
That's not capitalism, though. That's not capitalism.
I don't know. I mean, like I view the government as part of the capitalist system. So like,
But that's more like
it's a government.
socialism, though.
It's not. It's more corporatism. It's not. It's more like fascism than anything.
Yeah, it's
And
like
I don't love
communism
that.
or fascism or
It's not
socialism.
communism or socialism. It's more fascist. It's more corporatist. Like I think that is probably a problematic part of our economy, but it grows out of this like probably good idea that governments exist
Agree.
To mitigate externalities.
I agree.
Right?
They are like preventing mass suffering by economic depression and mass unemployment by bailing out banks.
But externalities like
sucks.
they're right. But banks exploding is a giant externality, right?
Yeah, but what are we going to do? We're just going to let banks continue to like siphon the treasury of an entire generation for just continuing on forever?
That's not what they're doing, though. That's not what they're doing. They're not siphoning the treasury of a generation.
Dude, look at the bonus payments of all these bankers. Look at these like
they're very
psychopathic Wall Street traders selling toxic derivatives, getting paid millions of dollars in bonuses, while most people are just working their normal job and suffering to get by and taking on all this debt. And I don't know. It just
Brad, like people making a lot of money. I mean, it sounds very resentful.
I'm not against capitalism.
Sure. But I would say this, like, are you evil for making lots of money in Bitcoin?
I think
you did nothing. You did nothing to deserve it. You didn't build the protocol. You didn't, come up with any type of
but I took
code
risk
or anything.
That's the difference.
I mean, you took risk. You put money into it, but it was a tiny amount of money, and the risk payoff is a little bit enormous, right? Like we can agree
which is I mean, why I think it's okay to make money. I think we should look up to entrepreneurs that are very successful and investors that are successful if they're not getting bailed out by the government. Like Warren Buffett, even though I don't like that he's making a lot of money off of like promoting diabetes with like Coca-Cola and McDonald's and all this stuff, he made his money the right way. He didn't take any money from the government, from the PPP loans or anything like that. Like he seems to be a genuine capitalist, and he's a net positive to the world, I think. So for somebody like in what way?
What's his biggest holding? His most
insurance companies, isn't it?
Which one?
The Geico, I think.
What does Geico stand for?
Lizard?
Oh.
I don't know. What do they do? They bail out the banks?
Government employee insurance company. Who's the biggest reinsurer in the United States for insurance and probably banks as well?
Geico?
Warren Buffett. Berkshire Hathaway.
Right.
I believe that to be the case. Like he participates in the system just like anybody else. He's benefiting from subsidies.
But he doesn't get bailed out though, does he?
He didn't need a bailout. He bails out. Like what Warren Buffett does is he keeps a lot of cash on the side.
Yeah,
so
but someone
needs a bailout, he bails them out.
That's capitalism.
When long-term capital management exploded, do you know who their first call was to?
Was it Buffett?
It was Buffett. They called him to buy their assets.
And what did he say? No thanks. You're toxic.
He said no. Yeah, he said no. He didn't want them. Which is why, but that was their first call. They called Buffett to basically buy their assets because he had the capital to ride out what they thought would eventually be profitable bets. And in fact, they were eventually very profitable bets. But in the short term, they were bad bets and they were cascading failures of bets. But their first call was to Buffett. Like Buffett does the bailing out.
Buffett is a capitalist and he's made money through capitalism. He hasn't made money off the money printer. Sure, he's benefited from the Cantillon effect, but his companies,
huge amounts in bank spread, like tons.
Yeah, but he sold a lot of banks. He sold a lot of his bank stock.
Yeah, recently after he made a ton of money.
Yeah,
he negotiated a private deal with Bank of America where he got stock price at a reduced price to the market, and then announced that he did that, which caused the price of Bank of America stock to jump.
Okay, so maybe I shouldn't use him as an example.
Like, no, you're not going to find anybody in America who's made a lot of money that hasn't like benefited from the system.
Okay, but to be fair, there is a difference between investing in the bank and then benefiting from the rise in the price of the stock versus
Those are the same thing. Like
running
you
the
invest,
bank and creating the toxic derivatives and working with the credit rating agencies and like
So, again, that's the
scamming
problem, is
everybody.
collusion with the credit rating agencies, right? That was the real issue.
And I
And they
don't
should
think
have been,
Warren Buffett should be blamed for that, for owning their
no, but
stock.
those people should have been sued up the wazoo,
For sure,
right? They should
yes.
have,
The banks
but
should
they
have
should
been
have been
too.
arrested for committing crimes, but we didn't have enough laws on the books to even deal with it. Like what they did was mostly legal. And that's the giant secret.
Yeah, but they could have been taken to court and
You don't
like,
want that system. You don't want that system. You don't want a system where you do things that are legal and retroactively declared illegal. You don't want that system. It's a bad system. It's a worse system than what we got.
I don't know how they could get around. Like it's fraud. What they did was fraud. Like how could you get around? I think it just wasn't prosecuted.
It wasn't. It wasn't.
Yeah, but
fraud.
I think there is. I think it was fraud. Like they. I guess it's not fraud because
it's not fraud.
It's
not fraud what they did at all.
It's
just
a scam.
It's what banks do every single day. It's what banks do every single day.
It's fraudulent,
look,
but
when
it's not fraud. It's collusion.
You're the one telling me that like a lot of these rich people are, more sophisticated investors, and that they're the ones that like, are making so much money.
I just said they're benefiting because they have fiduciaries
Brad,
that are
they're
putting
also
them into
the ones.
stuff. They have
They're
no
also
money.
the ones. That's a terrible idea. You should read a book called "Where Are the Customers' Yachts." It tells you all about fiduciaries putting people into money and how it doesn't make you money. They're the ones that take it on the chin. Do you think that Madoff
rich people?
Yes. You think that Madoff is the one that scammed poor people?
Okay.
You think, like he was like scamming poor people? No, he was scamming rich Jewish guys. He was scamming rich Jewish corporations and charities and individuals. And you think that it was the poor people that suffered the most in the downturn in the crisis? They didn't lose money because they didn't have as much money in the stock market. Rich people did. Like they're the ones that take it on the chin.
Well, actually, in the 2008 collapse, it was mostly like the working class that suffered more than I'd say rich people, because rich people,
everyone suffers in those. There were Lehman Brothers bankers who couldn't get jobs after that.
For sure,
They became
Lehman
poor
Brothers
people because they were leveraged to the hill.
For sure, those people.
No, but
just
Brad,
like the DeFi investors today. Like
being rich buys you conveniences. It buys you the ability to like have someone else clean your house instead of you doing it. It doesn't buy you much more than that. So like what happens is as you become wealthy, you leverage yourself up with expenses. And what happens is when that wealth rug is pulled out from under you, which can happen at any time if you don't manage your risk correctly, that wealth rug is pulled out from under you. Rich people become
don't know, man.
Very,
You're not going to convince me.
It's obvious.
It's an edge case. It's like,
and then what happens, Brad, is because they understand how credit works, and they understand how to get jobs, and they have a special skill set. Sometimes often they're able to get back on their feet.
Right.
If you want to pull people out of poverty, you can't simply like will it. It's not a magic. You can't do magic.
No, it requires education.
It requires them to want to do it.
Yeah, but okay, for sure. A lot of people are stuck in a cycle of not understanding how to about money at all. They don't understand money. They don't understand investing. They're born into debt slavery, basically predated or whatever that word is.
How are they? Wait. How
by
are they
banks
in debt slavery? No, they're not.
Yes, man. Like when I went to college.
Did you say Harvard?
There was like that's just a shitty college.
The Harvard College.
Yeah, spelled with 2 A's. Is that joke? Harvard.
Harvard.
Yeah, no, but a dumb young guy that's never got any financial education in his life, give yourself a student loan and then go. My buddy was like, I bought a DJ kit. I didn't spend it on anything. I didn't invest in anything. I bought a DJ kit and some drugs. So most kids that get their student loans, that's a significant burden for the next 10, 15 years of their life that they're they've got this weight of debt. Not just that, but you're then like
Then they
introduced
shouldn't have gone
into
to
high
college.
interest credit cards. Like the high interest credit cards. Okay, I know, but I'm saying, I'm agreeing with you that most people are born into a system that puts them in, they train them to be
Brad,
debt cucks.
What you're describing is a bad culture. You're not
Yes.
describing problems with money printing.
Yes,
You're
but
describing parents who believe that going to college is the way that you like
dude,
get up in life.
it's linked. It's intrinsically linked.
No, it's not.
It is.
No, it's not. It really isn't.
It
like
is.
The fact that the reason that people think that going to college is the key to making money in this world is highly related to this sort of like mimicry that the poor have of the rich. The rich used to go to college. They sent their kids to college. Why? Because who gives a fuck? I can afford it. So then the poor wanted to go to college. And what did they do? They went to college. And what we ended up with was an influx, an oversupply of educated people. We didn't need people to have degrees to be baristas at Starbucks, but we have so many people with degrees that Starbucks requires you to have a degree at some point.
Yeah, but that would be I would accept that argument if they also didn't at the same time rope you into high interest credit card debt. And also,
how do they rope you? You choose to spend that.
You're dumb. You're a dumb kid.
There's literally nothing more of a choice than handing that card over and spending that money.
Because you're a kid and you want instant gratification, and society kind of like puts this, we're a consumerist society.
You're describing a bad culture.
It's a bad culture. It's a bad culture. And it's all, I believe. But if we had a dollar that was backed by something and didn't have 0% like liquidity reserve requirements and was not fractionally reserved like massively to the hilt, I don't think that there would be as much risk taking from the top down. I think people would be more conservative with what they spent their money on. I don't think it would make sense for the inflation and tuition to be so high. It just, everything seems to be stacked against.
Tuition isn't high.
Well, it's high for it's high for what you're getting out of it. Like you're getting, dude, you're getting like $100,000 in debt to get a job that pays you minimum wage.
Very few people go $100,000 in debt. Very few.
Okay, well, even $30,000 or $40,000.
Most people don't go that far in debt. Something like $15K is the average cost per college.
Well, I'll tell you, my student loan was like $15,000.
No, this was right exactly what I said.
2002.
Exactly what I said.
Then my sister's was like 25,000.
Yeah, your sister got a worse scholarship than you.
I didn't get a scholarship.
You can't be that much younger.
She was only 1 year young. She went to film school. So 4 years. I went 2 years.
So she went to a different school.
Yeah, 2 years. So she double.
She bought a different thing than you. She bought a different product.
But
and it cost her more.
I'm saying, just let me finish though. I struggled for like a good 8 years after that with that student loan. It was a mental burden that I had this debt, even though it was only $15,000. Like I came from
because nobody taught you how to think about debt.
Right. I shouldn't have gone. I shouldn't have taken on the debt. It didn't make sense.
No, it's not about that. It's a culture problem you're describing. You are and put more questions up as people are saying. I want to see what other people are saying, but like, you're describing.
Talk about XRP.
We can talk about XRP. The problem you're discussing is a culture problem. It's really that you didn't know how to think about debt.
I agree with you.
You didn't know how to think about debt. So debt should not be a burden intellectually for you. Debt should be. You should understand debt as a part of your portfolio.
Yeah, but I don't think that it makes sense that we should be encouraging people to go into debt in student loans, because student loan debt is a gateway drug to high interest credit card debt. And that's,
my friend.
Yeah, it is. It totally is.
Being 18 is a gateway drug to high interest credit cards. Do you know how many people get high interest credit cards that didn't go to college? Like your thesis would
obviously, yes. So there's payday loan companies and everything too.
Yeah,
like people pay high interest payday loans.
High interest stuff has nothing to do with going to school. It's not a gateway drug. If you want, what we need to do is, if you want to, you have to change the culture and change how people think about what debt is. Debt is part of your portfolio. If you want to earn, I don't know what your debt was, probably 7%.
Yeah, but dude,
about right. Is that about right, Brad? Was your loan about 7%?
Interest rate?
Yeah.
I can't remember now. It's 10 years ago, 15 years
But what
ago.
do you 5 to 7? Is that about right?
I
You said
don't
it was high
know.
interest,
Probably
so
my credit card was like 25%, but
that's
my
pretty normal.
student loan was my car loan. My first car loan was like 11%. I got ripped off on that like
You should live in
crazy.
America.
I got ripped off like crazy on that one. They saw me as a sucker and they're like kept raising the thing, and I'm like, oh, I know I got no interest, I got no credit. If you could please give me this car, and the guy's going back. Oh, I gotta go talk to the manager. He comes back with 7%, and I sign the thing. He comes back. He's like, oh, the manager says you don't have enough income on your return. We're gonna have to go up to 11. I'm like, oh, thank you so much. I just need a car. I got totally taken advantage of.
Oh yeah, you did. But like that, that's a culture problem. You didn't know how to think about debt.
I didn't.
If you want to know how to think about it, like let's say you have debt of a loan of 7%. If you pay that loan off, that is the same compounding as getting a 7% return.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you start thinking about debt correctly, you change your mindset about it, and it ceases to be a burden. Like I said,
but I was working,
life is run
I was
on
working
debt.
minimum wage. I didn't have opportunity to get anything from my college degree.
Did you pay off your loan?
You know what I was actually going to do? I started learning about the way money's made and how the fractional reserve system worked, and I just felt like I got scammed on the whole thing.
So you got resentful.
I did. I was like, this is ridiculous that the government can allow the banks to take money that doesn't exist, give it to me, and then charge me 20% on it. That's just a big scam. And they're doing it to everybody. And everybody's just in debt for the rest of their lives because the interest rate is so high on all their debt. And most people in the lower class and the middle class
you're by the way, you're articulating why the lower class can't save. It's because they don't understand that debt is savings. So if you are in debt,
that's
clip,
not savings.
It is true. It is true. It is savings. Yes, it is.
That is debt. That is
savings.
That is a liability. It's like a monthly liability.
Debt is savings.
If you pay off your debt, you're saving interest.
Well, paying off your debt is a literal injection into your savings account. If you have 18% credit card debt, and you, if you were basically to pay, pay the minimum, you're essentially losing half of the value of whatever you have on the credit card every 4 years, right? So if you have $10,000, it's at 18%. It takes 4 years to service that. It would take 4 years. You would have spent essentially another $10,000 servicing that debt at the minimums, right? If you
pay off the debt and you're saving money.
If you have 18% debt and you pay it down, you are literally saving 18% of that money. You're putting it into savings because that is how you pay it down. You get an 18% return on that money. That's the highest return you'll ever get. If
you didn't have the debt, you wouldn't have the negative either. So you shouldn't have high interest debt. You should never, I don't think you should ever take 20% interest.
I take 20% loans all the time and make money on them.
Short term.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're gonna pay it off short term, you're gonna flip some TVs or something like that, or buy some Beanie Babies and flip them or something like that.
Flip the beanies. But like you can do other things, Brad. Like you can float. Like I know people that had that paid for college using credit cards, and they just rotated cards on cards that were like 4%. 3%.
I did that too. Like I would occasionally get offered like a balance transfer or something, and your
debt was 3% per year then on those.
It was like I think one of the ones I got was like 0% for 6 months, and then it was 20% again or something like that. It was just like a short-term relief on my interest payments, and I would just try to roll it over, and it still sucked to have the student loan debt, the car loan debt, because my car died like 4 years later because it was a used car, and I'm still like 10 years on paying this.
I'm with you, Brad. Like
payment.
No one should take an 11% out, 11% car loan out. That's a very bad idea.
Oh, that's terrible.
A mistake. That's a mistake of a young person.
Yes.
But like this is a culture problem. You need to teach you need to teach finance
Okay,
in high school.
but listen,
The problem you have is that nobody understands how to teach it.
It's not just that, Junseth. It's not fair that the bank gets to create money from nothing and charge you 20% interest or even 11% interest. They don't have the assets to back it because money's not real.
Money is real.
That's usury. That's like the definition of usury, and it's
not 11%.
Right.
11% is the rate on a loan that has no collateral.
Yeah, okay, but they're getting at the same time, if this was a free market and they were taking the risk, and if I didn't pay, there was anything that they had any risk to that they were going to lose money, then I would say morally it's okay because it's a free market, and I should pay my debts because they're taking risk.
I'm with you. So you believe in Muslim finance.
Well, I thought Muslim finance was like you can't have
usury.
Yeah, no usury. I don't like usury.
I don't know what I don't.
They're not taking risk.
I don't know how to define usury. Like some people define it as any interest at all, but
I think 20% interest is usury for sure.
Well, what if it articulates the risk that the people that are taking it on literally
it would
are holding?
Yes, for sure. If it's like
the only way to profit on that money is to, and there's an insidious secret, by the way, Brad, about 20% debt on credit cards. Insidious. I'll tell it to you. Do you want to know it?
Yes, please.
It's non-collateralized, which means if you don't pay it back,
they got nothing.
Anything.
Exactly.
So that's not really usury. It's actually a bargain.
Okay, but they don't. Most people aren't aware of this, and most people think that if you don't pay back your debt, you're going to get like the creditors are going to be able to throw you in jail or something like that. Like most people it'll wreck your credit. Yeah, but it's not going to affect you at all in the real world unless you don't want credit. If you don't care about not having credit, you can just tell them to shove it, and they can't do anything about it. Credit card debt, but not like student loan debt because they won't let you off the hook for that.
Student loan debt isn't high; it's like 6 or 7%. And if you
it's true. It's
6 or 7% return on your money, you can pay off your student loans.
But still,
and you could do it. You could even do it with an 18% credit card that you don't pay back.
Yeah, but still, dude.
There's ways if you want to fuck the system,
hold on.
You can absolutely fuck the system because there's all sorts of ways that you can like get money for free, and if you're willing to bear the consequences of it, like whatever.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to do, actually. When I learned about how money really worked and that when I'm taking a loan from the bank for a credit card and they're charging me 20% interest, and it's actually just like money created from nothing when I sign the form and like pretty much will the money into existence with my signature, and then they charge me 20% and the money didn't exist in the first place. They don't have assets to back the money they're giving me. Like I don't have it. It's unsecured from me and it's unsecured from them because they're not at risk because they're a bank.
If the money didn't exist, how did you spend it?
Because they created from nothing. The money gets created by the bank through fractional reserve banking.
But that's fine. Like who cares? You realize that if they didn't,
because it's not fair. That's just the thing. It's like they're benefiting.
Brad, if they didn't do fractional reserve banking, the Fed would just print 10 times more money. You realize that, right?
Yeah.
And I know you don't believe this is more like fractional reserve is highly profitable. It's inventory management of cash. It's exactly the Uber proposition with your car. It's using cash in an inventory intelligent way. Absolutely is.
No, because the cash is created from nothing. A car is actually
not created from nothing.
It's like the difference between proof of work and proof of stake.
No, it's not. It's very much. Very much
different. The Uber is proof of work. The cash is proof of stake. And that's
not at all.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
You actually have to have a car. You have to have a car. You can
actually do the double entry accounting to prove that the cash is there. Like if you all went to the bank today, certainly you wouldn't have it. But that's not how that works. The system works with literal inventory management.
And people don't realize this. And that's
this is what I asked you. This is what I asked you earlier. Is your thesis that if people understood how fractional reserve banking is,
I think they'd freak out. Money out of the banks. I think, if banks you're never going to be able to convince me that it's fair for me to pay 20% interest on this money that's created from nothing and give it to the bank. And then when the bank creates a problem and screws up,
The bank doesn't give you
get
20%
free money.
Whoa, the bank doesn't give you 20% uncollateralized. They give you about 11 or 12% uncollateralized, right?
No,
And
it's high, man. It's like
it's like 11 or 12%
no, it's
for
not.
uncollateralized loans. Absolutely.
Uncollateralized. I'm talking about credit cards.
Yeah, those aren't the bank.
That's the bank here in Canada. It's the bank.
Well, I guess banks are the underwriters, so probably it does.
Yeah, they're like consumer bank branded credit cards. It's like Visa, like TD Visa bank card or credit card. But they don't have any risk because the government's always going to bail them out, and the government that like the money that's used by the government to bail out the banks is always just taxpayer obligations.
You ever run this experiment, Brad? Have you ever like gone out and not like tried to give anyone like a libertarian speech on fractional? Just explain how money works, explain fractional banking. I bet you a majority of people, if they weren't given a speech about libertarianism, would be like, "That's really interesting." I don't think they would run.
I think maybe I don't ask them. I do talk about this quite a bit, not so much anymore. I more so just tell people about Bitcoin because most people kind of don't like money now because they don't have much of it. But I think like I've definitely talked to a lot of people about this because it was mind-blowing for me when I first realized that dollars aren't backed by gold. And in fact, banks create dollars on a whim and your signature wills money into existence. And when you don't pay it back, the bank loses nothing. And you're still paying 20% interest on it.
It's not created.
And they get bailed out when they screw up.
Brad, you got to realize though, there's a limit to rehypothecation, right? They can only fractionalize it.
Not since COVID.
Yeah, well, that's a weird issue. But there is a limit.
But even still,
you can only fractionalize it 90, so far.
Yeah, you can fractionalize it
10 times.
10 times, so like 90%, 10%, 8 to 10% was supposed to be the back.
When the Fed prints money, they know exactly how much money will be created on the other end. So if you want to complain about,
that doesn't mean that that's okay. That doesn't mean that that's a sound monetary base. I feel like it's bad.
It's a state of nature. That is the state of nature. Like if you really wanted to be libertarian about it, what you should argue is that you should have banks all competing for fractional reserve amounts. And
I think that makes
coming to the optimal number. Well, we did that. It was called wildcat banking. Do you know what banks did?
Well, they went bankrupt, and
they went bankrupt, and they fractionalized to 0%.
Yeah, no, I agree.
The government set minimum reserve requirements for that reason because they were trying to manage an externality.
Yeah, but they didn't. They didn't.
The
set
state of nature is to fractionalize. The libertarian position on this should be that fractionalization is good because it is free.
No way. Banks didn't. No, wildcat banking to fractional reserve banking was like 80 years or something. It wasn't.
No, banks
wildcat banking was like
fractionalizing gold.
Yeah. Okay. So you're right. They were still gold backing, but they would fractionalize the gold backing. I'm talking about like the 70s when it's like no backing at all anymore. That's what I consider like the full modern money experiment with no fractional reserve.
We have about 10%. It's been required to have a 10% reserve for most of our lives. About a 10%.
Yeah, which is insane. That's crazy. That's just
it's like amazing that it works, but it works.
It does.
Financial inventory is incredible.
Yeah,
money inventory is amazing. This is the thing. Like, let's get to Bitcoin real quick. Nobody realizes this about Tether. No one ever tries to get their tethers into dollars. No one ever claims the tethers, right?
Some people do.
It's almost no one. Like even
not
less than
a lot.
banks.
Not a lot do.
I'd bet you, Brad, it's like 25 people a year.
Yeah, I think
there's billions of dollars and 25 of them want their dollars. So
I haven't actually looked at the stats of redemptions.
So
I do know some people who've redeemed a lot of Tether.
From Tether itself or from like Coinbase?
From Tether.
Okay.
Like from Bitfinex.
Okay. So, yeah, but there's actually a way to redeem tethers. Like it's different when like Bitfinex sells them on their market and has the cash there, right? But like I'm saying like literally redeeming them from Tether, the Tether bank, if you will.
Right.
So people complain about Tether all the time, but Tether doesn't really have a problem. They never have to worry about the fractionalization issue. They could fractionalize down to like 0.5% and nobody would ever know or care because the money management, the inventory management of the cash, it would be very easy. Nobody redeems tethers.
So
It's rare that people redeem cash. So like that's not a moral problem. It's just the state of nature. People don't redeem cash. They keep it in the bank. The bank double entry accounts for all the cash they have. If they loan it out, it has to come from somewhere. If you get the loan, you have to put it somewhere. So you put it back in the bank. The bank then rehypothecates. Like that's just like, I don't know how else you would run banking.
well, okay, so money, this is another half an hour discussion to go into. We can start and see where we go, but I think it's like all related, like what we've all been talking about. I think that fractional reserve banking to a point is good for society, but I don't think that the experiment has proven that 90% money multiplier, or like 10x money multiplier, and only having 10% of the money on reserve in the system to back the amount of dollars that exists in the digital system is a smart idea. I think it's painted over the risks, and that's clear in 2008, and it's clear again in COVID and all through the last 10 years, that the people that benefit from fractional reserve banking the most are the banks and the CEOs of public companies that are getting bailed out. I think that if we were going to have,
wait a sec real quick. How would you know that the banks are the biggest beneficiaries of fractional reserve banking or like of this system? How would you be able to tell that?
Because they get to make loans with no collateral backing the loans and charge 20% interest for the credit cards. So that's a whole scam.
They must be absurdly profitable then, right?
Well, they're CEOs for sure, like the executives of the banks and the salespeople at the banks, like not the commercial, not like the pleb, like people that are working at the local branches, but the executives, like the C-level executives and the Wall Street sort of commercial banks.
Those people take a small amount of the profits, a very small amount comparatively.
I'm not talking about the credit card system. I don't think
I know. I'm talking about the banking system. Like those people take a very small amount of the money in the bank. So, the bank pays what they need to pay a CEO in order to attract a competent CEO. Those CEOs are worth a lot. They make a lot of money. Oh
man, no way! I can't accept that.
Well, Brad, you could let's ignore the salary.
So a really good scammer is worth a good $50 million in bonuses a year.
If you define bank as a scammer, but like okay, fine, take the 50 million and put it into the market cap of banks. I would say that if you take the bonuses and the value and the salaries of these top executives, and you put them into the earnings of the bank, it will represent less than 0.1% of what the bank brings in. I'd put that out there.
I believe that's true. Okay, here's the macro picture. You're making a good point, but I don't think that we should take any one of these points in like just.
I'm not quite done with my point. Real quick.
Oh, you're not finished. Okay, go ahead.
If you want to measure the level of wealth that the banks have compared to you, take all of their earnings, include the bonuses and everything else, which will end up being de minimis compared to the earnings of the bank, and just go ahead and take a look at like a financial ETF. Vanguard has one, and put it out 5 years and see what's made more, holding bank stocks or holding like Vanguard's total market ETF. And what you'll find is that bank stocks underperform the index almost every year. So it's just not true that they're making these outsized returns.
Bank stocks are not as big as like a tech company stock. Like Mark Zuckerberg is much wealthier than a banker who got bailed out by the Federal Reserve. Because
he's done way more to ruin our society.
Sure. Like a lot of young people are just kind of like their minds are turning to mush and they're getting depressed over like social media, addicted to social media. I agree that that's an issue, but I kind of believe that central bankers manipulating the free market, controlling interest rates, printing money through quantitative easing and through like just open market operations. Oh, you losing sound?
No, I'm just making sure I don't.
Oh, okay. I think that manipulating the free market, I do think that that's a problem, that the interest rates shouldn't be held down by the central banks. I think that's a big problem. I think that they're printing money and giving it to banks who are taking too much risk, and nobody gets put in jail or even like reprimanded. I think that's a problem.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that bankers and the Wall Street, like central Wall Street, investment bank folks that are the ones, the quants and the salespeople that are creating these toxic derivatives and pretty much turning the public markets into a big casino. Like the stock market is just a casino. Like most of the money comes from hedging and derivatives and all this crap. Like that's just a casino for rich people. I think that's ridiculous.
I find that to be ridiculous, though. I don't think that's true. I think that like investing in individual stocks is casino-ish, but investing in a broad-based index is not.
I'm not talking about broad-based index of stocks. I'm talking about like the VIX, like the volatility index, like that type of stuff, and quant products, that stuff, like derivative products that does massive volumes. It's not anything real. It's like you can't own volatility, but that's the biggest.
But you can trade it.
Yeah, but you can trade it. Yeah,
you can't own a Bitcoin.
Oh, you can own a Bitcoin,
not physically.
I mean, you can't own VIX like you can own Bitcoin. You can't own a you can own a UTXO.
You can own volatility, Brad. You can absolutely own volatility.
You can't own volatility.
You literally can. You can buy volatility.
Volatility is centralized, Junseth.
Well, you're almost exactly correct. Like you can't literally own the volatility index because
you can own a UTXO. I got one here in my house. I'm just kidding. I store them in the vault somewhere.
No, you have a private key that controls a UTXO.
No, I actually have a UTXO on my open dime.
Is it in your butt?
Yeah.
No, but you have like if someone else has that private key, then they have your UTXO, right? So like no one owns Bitcoin.
A UTXO on a private key or on an open dime is a special. It's like you physically
you own a private key. You own a private key that controls Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a perfectly fine thing to have.
Well, when you put it on an open dime, it actually puts it as a physical Bitcoin. The UTXO.
It's close-ish. It's close-ish.
But it only exists on that device. Nobody else.
As long as no one else has the private key.
but it's not. It's impossible for someone else to.
Yeah, well, that's why this system works, is because it's virtually impossible to create that same number. But yeah, like if volatility is not, you don't own volatility. The VIX, derivatives or whatever you want to call them, the products exist as like a group of products that are supposed to reflect the VIX, right? The VIX itself is a theoretical concept. So what bankers try to do is develop a product that reflects
into like such a massive trade and piece of the portfolio that
no. Like my point is, Brad, that when you own the quote VIX, you don't own the VIX. You own a portfolio of things that that someone has put together to represent the VIX.
No, this is the derivative nonsense that happens on Wall Street. It's not actually a stock. It's just you're betting on the percentage move of the stock.
You're not correct on this. The VIX is literally a group of products that reflect a theoretical index.
Yeah, it's a theoretical index of volatility of it's like the price
and the thing you can and the thing you can invest is not in the VIX. You invest in a group of products that someone put together that they believe represents the volatility. You don't actually own. You're not investing in volatility per se. You're investing in actual things.
Well, you're investing in the index of the volatility times whatever multiplier they use of a certain basket of stuff.
You're not. You're investing in a group of a basket, yes, but a group of things that a person believes will reflect the VIX's volatility. That's all you're. Go look it up.
We're gonna have to look this one up again. I thought it was a derivative vehicle for the amount of volatility in a certain index. times some kind of multiplier, not actually like shares of stocks in certain indexes, but just purely looking at how volatile the index goes. Like that's the VIX. It's just volatility, and it's just like a slot machine. You're just pulling the slot machine on
But what
volatility.
you can, that's not really what it's for, by the way.
I know it's
The
for
reason that,
hedging. It's like a hedging strategy to like
well,
offset.
no. The reason that the VIX matters is because there are times. So do you know anything about the 5-factor model in investments?
Oh,
Okay, one of the factors
probably
is
some kind of
momentum.
Wall Street scam.
It's more of an academic scam. One of the factors is these are essentially the 5 factors that you cannot diversify away and that you can be compensated for in the market, right? And one of those factors is momentum, right? So
Right.
if you can trade literal volatility in the market, what you can do is you can basically get one of those compensatory factors. You can be compensated for volatility, which is what momentum is.
Right.
So that's the purpose of the VIX, is it allows you to have a pure form of compensation for one of the 5 factors, and that's why they have it.
Okay, so it says it's a 30-day expectation of volatility given by a weighted portfolio of out of the money options of the S&P 500.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a Frankenstein product for gamblers.
No. It's not. It's got to use
Bitcoin
utility. You can certainly use it.
Bitcoin is kind of like the VIX in a
It
way,
is. That's how I trade it, by the way, Brad.
except it's an actual thing. Like it's a commodity. Like you can't own the VIX. You can own the Bitcoin.
But you can own out of the money puts
You
and
can
calls.
buy out of the money puts and calls
You
yourself.
can own
Yeah.
them. You can own
Yeah.
them. If you own the puts and the calls, like you
Yeah.
own
You can
them,
own them. Yeah.
and those are very, very simple contracts, right? You know what you're getting if the price hits a certain level,
So I
you can
guess then
exercise that.
the
The
VIX
VIX.
is a way to shortcut going and placing all those options trades.
Well, what the VIX is it's a way to trade on volatility. So that means there's a belief in the market. A great book on this is called A Random Walk Down Wall Street. There's a concept mathematically called random walks. Do you know what that is?
Is that the efficient market hypothesis?
Well, it's part of the efficient market
That
hypothesis, but random
there's
walks.
randomness to it, and
Well, random walks are a mathematical concept that are employed. So, like the question that was asked is the market a random walk? And there's a lot of work on this, and many people who believe it is. So, a random walk essentially meaning that
that's like
there's
Black
noise.
Swan was written to kind of disprove the random walk, right?
Not so much to disprove it, just to talk about like in random walks, you can also have like these giant dips, right? You can have these black swan events even in random walks.
Right.
Like the idea is that the market is volatile, it goes up, it goes down, and it's volatile, but to the upwards direction, essentially. But that its price at any given moment is a random walk. It reflects the value and known information, but why it's $3.01 now, and then 14 seconds from now it's $2.97. That volatility reflects uncertainty, right? So the
Right.
market is a random walk, and you can make money by trading on volatility, which means that if you can buy a stock at $3.02 and sell it at $2.98, and then buy it again at $3.02, which is just literally noise, you can make money. And you can make a lot of it, even if the thing that you're investing in is going sideways. So there's actually people that put portfolios together, which are like 50% stock, 50% cash. And those portfolios basically perform as well or close to as well as simply holding stock, like 100%.
Okay, so that is like a trading strategy, and
well, it's
most
not so much a trading
I
strategy
imagine
so a trading strategy is, I think of it as like a way to trade like on instinct and whatnot. But this isn't that. This is a way to capture one of the 5 factors, the goal of which is to then capture the other 4 factors, one of which would be diversification, right? So if you can use volatility to further diversify your portfolio, and to gain more stocks, you're essentially being compensated for holding the volatility. If you can trade pure volatility, you remove all the factors out of it, which is what the goal of this stuff is. So, for example, you're talking about how store of value leaks into homes, or Tina talks about how store of value leaks into stocks and such. Well, if you can move these elements out of their constituent parts, like if you can move store of value from volatility and trade pure volatility, then what you can do is, you can make money. You can be compensated for holding volatility. I actually think you're correct and astute in saying that's essentially what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is a vehicle whereby you can be compensated for volatility. That's strongly true.
Except you can own the Bitcoins.
Oh, yeah.
It's like the actual, it's like the VIX, but in real life with better, not in
One
real
of the
life,
things
but,
you can
but
do.
like,
One of the things you can do with your Bitcoin is compensate yourself for holding it holding its volatility. Like, I gain Bitcoin whenever it goes down because I sell other shit and I buy Bitcoin.
Right. I guess the thing that kind of frustrates me about the volatility thing on Wall Street is that it feels like that's become more the product, like all these financial products and derivatives. It seems like those have become more about, like, that's the economy more, and the market more than like the fundamentals of like companies. That's like, it feels like volatility and derivatives is more important than profits of a company. And that feels like that's because
Volatility is separate from it. Like, the reason volatility matters is because it's one of the 5 factors. That's really what it is.
well, not just
And
volatility,
profits
but
aren't related to it.
derivatives. There's like the derivatives market is massive.
But derivatives means a lot of things to a lot of people. So when you say derivatives, what are you talking about?
I'm talking about like the Big Short stuff, where it's how like synthetic products that are bets on other industries, and like
So you're
inverse
talking about
bets,
mortgages, for example?
not just mortgages, but like there's synthetic products for inflation rate, like CPI. There's synthetics products
What are those?
They're just bets on inflation. CPI will stay within a range in Mexico or something like that.
But Brad, almost every synthetic product has to have something backing it. So, like, derivatives are a derivative of something. So what are the derivatives of is usually what I'm asking. Like,
okay, so there's the like the kind of vanilla derivatives, which are like futures and stuff that are like commodities futures and stuff like that. Like, that's right? Derivatives. I mean, that's really confusing, but it's easier to understand than a synthetic derivative, which is a basket of mortgages.
But a basket of mortgages isn't synthetic.
Okay, but this is
actually wait a sec. This is actually how the mortgage crisis started. Was someone was like, okay, you know what? We're trading this as though it's a synthetic thing, but I'm actually going to go in and I'm going to start looking at the mortgages in this bundle, and I'm going to look at the quality of them. And he did that, and what he discovered was they were shit quality. But he was able to discover that because it wasn't a synthetic.
Yeah, but then so yes,
literally able to look at the mortgages.
So those are structured notes or structured products, I think they call those types of derivatives.
Mm-hmm.
And those specific ones were baskets of mortgages that were misrated by the credit agencies, and the risk was miscalculated by the banks that were trading these things and buying them, because they were assuming the credit ratings were good, were legit, like what the credit agencies were giving the ratings. But that's just bullshit, because this was happening in the 90s when the derivatives, when they first started creating the derivatives products, they were doing all kinds of crazy toxic shit with derivatives, and everybody knew this was happening. The banks knew this was super high risk because they did it in the 90s. And
the banks were essentially bribing the credit agencies to with baskets, right?
by basically saying, we're going to go to your competitor if you don't
correct
you take our business. But back in the 90s when they were doing it, there's this book, it's I can't remember the name of the book, but it's about the derivatives market in the 90s. And they used to do
There's a lot of
stuff.
those. Which one?
Fiasco.
Okay.
So they used to do bets. These derivative products were bets on random different things. Like some of it was A-rated government bonds, and then like 5% of it or something. And then 95% of it was like emerging markets bets on the currency exchange rate or something like that. Super high risk stuff. And then they would structure these products together, and then they would convince the credit agencies to rate it A because it had some A-rated government bonds in it. But the bulk of it was this toxic shit that was really high risk. And then they'd go and sell these products to, I don't know, pension funds and companies like Procter and Gamble, I think was one
Brad,
of the companies.
there's a big opportunity here. All right. If you believe that this is still happening, go find these quasi-synthetic derivatives. They're not synthetic, but like go find these bundle derivatives.
Yeah, those things aren't synthetics. Those are just structured products.
But what I'm saying is find the ones that are mispriced, and you can make billions.
Yeah, but in a system where it's not a free market and the banks are basically bailed out, you don't really make billions because the banks are bailed out and
There was
market's
one man.
manipulated.
There were like 3 or 4 people who put money into CDOs and made these credit default swaps and or with CDSs, and they made a fuck ton. They're multi-billionaires right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because they bought this other derivative, which was essentially a product that was like bundled insurance against the possibility of these defaults.
Right.
And they made a fuck ton. So there's a huge opportunity. If you truly believe that about the economy, go find those bundles, unwind them, and see if they're quality. See if the credit agencies are right.
Okay.
You won't do that because nobody will do that. It's a time-consuming task that one person will do, and they will sound the alarm, and the economy will crash. And this is what's funny. It's not a free. This is like my same criticism of like audited code. Nobody audits code. Like nobody ever goes through these derivatives. They could, but they don't. If you want, like it is not enough to say free market, because the free market had every opportunity to discover what was in these bundles, and they didn't do it.
Well, they did, and like obviously that's what The Big Short was about. It was about
one guy did after like 30 years of this happening.
A couple of people finding it and doing the trade, but they were even though they were right, they almost went bankrupt trying to wait for the risk to get priced in, because even though they were right.
I don't know if that's true. The big one was the hedge fund guy in Texas. Like, you're making a bet, and there is a time value of money, and you have to be right at the right time, right? In order for this to work.
I don't have the balls to go short on things I think are way overvalued. Like,
but that's why the CDS.
We're talking about Ripple, right? Ripple, we were not, but the guy asked us to. Ripple is something that I would have thought, okay, short that shit as soon as the SEC takes them to court, because it's 50 cents and it's going to go to a penny. Like, that's would have been a terrible short, because it ended up pumping another 75%.
Never short crypto. Ever. Right? That's the lesson that everyone should learn.
Yeah. Unless you're hedging, it's okay as a hedge to, like, if you're long crypto.
Yeah, that's true. Long crypto, short crypto that way. If you do it right, but like just don't short crypto as like a naked shorting crypto is like
it's irrational. Bad idea. The market's irrational for sure. Like, I feel like I don't know, man. I feel like it's not just Wall Street. It's also people. It's also the government is allowing all this to happen because they're kicking the can down the road, because they don't want to see the pensions fall apart in the depression on their watch. And I don't blame them for not wanting to see that. That would be chaos.
Bitcoiners should be very, very happy that they're doing it, because if you're correct about that, what that means is that you've had a lot more cash to purchase Bitcoin than you otherwise would have had.
If you're getting cash from the money printing.
No. You have the ability to go get free and cheap credit. Like,
that's true. Yeah, that's true. Like, I was actually considering mortgaging my house probably at like $50,000. I was
So
like,
yeah, Brad,
I
like
filled out the
exactly.
application. I'm like, I'm going to buy more Bitcoin, lock this mortgage in at a low interest rate, take advantage of that, and buy Bitcoin. Thankfully, I waited because things started to feel toppy. Like when neighbors are calling me over to say, hey, let's talk about Bitcoin because I just bought some SafeMoon Bitcoins and some Dogecoin Bitcoins. I want to know what other Bitcoins to buy. When that shit's happened to me, I'm like, okay, maybe I should wait on the leverage. But
That's often the case.
I mean, I'm still considering it heavily now that the prices are down. I'm like,
So you
Jesus,
should
like,
thank the government for giving you that opportunity. For you, like this idea of easy money for Bitcoiners should be like awesome. I'm going to take
yeah,
that.
I mean, obviously that's what's happening. People are getting their checks, and it's great. Like people love getting checks. People love getting checks for sure, and it's good that they're giving people some checks at least now. Like the U.S., I think they're going to give $3,000 a month to anybody with a child.
Oh,
I
nice.
mean, I would
I've done
rather
that.
see them weaponize the money printer to give it to the people rather than to bail out the banks.
Well, I'm all for that. I think that they should give people money. I think that they should probably raise reserve requirements to like 90% in order to compensate for that.
Yeah.
But you
But if
know,
they did that, then the stock market would fall apart if they tried to raise the reserve requirements.
maybe the
Banks would
problem is
stop
right
lending
now,
to each other, rates would go up.
in my opinion, I think that people are ceasing to, or the people do not get to profit from the seigniorage of money creation.
Right.
And I don't think the banks should be the ones to profit from that in a world
I
where
agree.
you can distribute money digitally. But it's not a thing that you could have done 20 years ago. You can only do it today.
Right.
You know,
It would
and
have been hard. I mean,
that's the
they
thing.
did it in Weimar,
It would have been
Germany. Like
impossible.
they literally had trucks driving around, dumping satchels full of cash and wheelbarrows full of cash to people. It's
Idea,
way easier to do it digitally now.
You can only do it digitally. The only way it will be
At
sustainable
scale, yeah.
and forever is digital. And I'm okay with that. Like I would be okay with that discussion.
I am okay with that. I think that would be a decent life for a lot of people that are below the poverty line.
It would also tighten your credit, which is what you want, right?
What do you mean?
I don't think you do. If you did it my way, where you raise reserve requirements to like 90%, and then you do UBI for for the lower income in particular, you'd give people the seigniorage of the money.
That would be net positive for sure, because
I tend to think so too. Because then
a net benefit of that as well.
People can pick banks,
and forget about the people. Like that would decrease consumerism because you would get less debt. You'd get less credit, easy credit.
I don't think it would decrease consumerism. I think that you'd have poor people instead of saving.
Oh, you're right, because they're getting the checks.
They would show exactly why they never
get
rich.
Checks. Okay, end the drug war. All right, end the drug war, legalize drugs, UBI for all the poor people, like raise credit requirements for the banks.
I would go so far as to say,
and financial education.
Yes, exactly.
Those are the 5 things.
Culture is the issue. If you want to increase volatility or velocity of money, give poor people tons.
And buy Bitcoin. We forgot about buy Bitcoin. Jesus.
Oh, buy Bitcoin. Buy Bitcoin. Vote Trump. Buy guns.
I'll take buy Bitcoin.
Vote Trump. Buy guns.
Hey, I'm Canadian, man.
I've been joking. I've been joking for years. I've been saying Ammon Bundy for president as a joke.
Cool.
and his name's Ammon Bundy. He's a guy in America that like raised up a militia to like fight the government back in like not that like 10 years ago.
Okay.
And they had under Obama's administration, they had a big standoff, and he won.
Oh, the guy that was defending his cultural lands or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I remember.
So I've been saying for years, like he's my write-in, and he's now running for Idaho governor.
Oh yeah.
So, like my joke is becoming too real.
It was like that they wanted to have let their cattle graze on the land, right? But the ATF or one of these law enforcement agencies,
agriculture, I think Department of Agriculture or something like that.
Yeah, they were saying, "Oh, this is a natural reserve," but they're like, "We're cattle ranchers. We have rights to let our cattle graze here," and they actually defended and won, which I totally agree with.
Bad to the government. I don't know what I agree with, but Ammon Bundy for president. I don't
Or
know
if,
enough about the issue, right? Like I don't know much
yeah,
about like cattle grazing or the laws there.
I don't. I'm anti-authoritarian, I guess. So
Well,
I
everybody
like.
is. This was the whole COVID thing was hilarious to me because the conservative group in America is very anti-authoritarian, which is all you need to know to explain all of the mask stuff. So, like when the government said don't wear masks, conservatives were like, "Fuck you, I'm wearing masks." And then when the government said wear masks and you have to, they were like, "Fuck you, I'm not wearing masks." And I watch liberals in the U.S. trying to figure out what's going on. They're like,
Yeah.
"Why are all these people refusing to wear masks?" Because you told them to. If you wanted them to wear masks, you shouldn't have made it a
Yeah,
law.
when
You should
Fauci
have just said like
originally was saying don't
the
wear a mask, everybody was like, "All
conservatives
right,
like I'm putting
I'm gonna."
12 on. Yeah.
Yeah, I was
But
like,
I was like, if you wanted
"Oh,
conservatives to wear masks, you should have been like, we think it's a good idea. It'll probably save some people.
well,
And the conservatives are like, well,
seriously."
fuck you, I'm wearing them. You should be stronger about this.
At the very beginning, when the government was saying like this is no big deal, don't wear a mask, you don't have to worry about it, like most of the people were like people like us were going out and buying like months
I
worth of
bought all the
food,
masks. I bought like
buying all the
exactly what
masks,
happened.
and
I was like,
if the
okay,
government's
this
telling
is
me not to worry about it,
I,
I'm worried about it.
I was buying food in January, early
Me
February,
too.
as I was watching videos come out of China and Telegram, and I was like, "This is the big one."
What do you
So
think
I went.
that was, man? Like, what was that?
I mean, the fact that we knew about it and they didn't.
No, what was all those videos coming out of China? Because that never happened here to the level of where it was happening in the videos
Well,
leaked out
that's
of
what happens
China.
when it's completely unmanaged and you have an authority. But I also think there was a fair amount of propaganda.
Like, we're
But
seeing videos of people like getting welded into their buildings and stuff, and
well, I
like,
think that was probably released by the regime as a way to like control people. Like, this is what we're doing. Don't come out. You know.
and it
So
leaked
I think
here.
yeah, and so like it looks real bad. But my guess is it was
Oh,
like
so you think that
probably three families.
maybe they were doing propaganda to control the population, and then
Yes.
it got leaked here, and we all thought, oh my god, like
But
this is like,
those videos weren't released until like February, March. I'm saying like I was watching videos come out of China in mid and early
yeah,
January and
me
late
too. I
December.
was watching those January videos.
So I sat down with my. I'm sorry, I'm going to sneeze.
Bless you.
Yeah. So I sat down with people back in February and was like, early January, or late January, early February, and was like, this is what's going to happen. I think this is the big one. You need to go to the grocery store, buy as many groceries as you can because like it's going to get nuts. Go buy. I'm going to do the same. I did the same thing. Go do what you need to do because like lockdowns are coming.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like they all did it, but they were kind of reluctant. They're like, fucking crazy Junseth. And they did it anyways. And when it happened, they were like, how the hell did you know?
Yeah.
And it was
Same
it was an
here. It's
access
the
to
exact same
information
thing. I was doing the videos and the Facebook groups and all that stuff, trying to prepare
I had
people.
masks weeks early. I remember fighting with my friend in DC. He said, the Surgeon General says you don't need it. And I was like, okay, then don't buy it. I bought mine like 2 weeks ago.
So okay, so then
it's a good idea.
What do you think ended up being like? Do you think that it was actually spreading way earlier and way more, and like we just didn't do the antibody testing to discover people had already gotten over it, or like what do you think
I
happened?
presume and have presumed for a long time that COVID started in around September of last year, or it was last year, the year before, in China. And I have, not to be crazy, but I've presumed since the beginning that the lab leak hypothesis was proposed, that was how somehow it's related to labs. Some of the scientific papers I've read recently are positing that it may have been not so much gain of function research, but it may have been, I don't remember what it's called, like serology or something like that. Actually, let me look. I'll tell you in a sec. But that there was a lot of experiments done on ferrets, and like some people are of the opinion that it was sort of bred in ferrets and accidentally got out. So serial passage, that's what it's called. So there's a lot of literature on that's started to come out. But regardless, it seems, in my opinion, to have like non-natural origins, unless you want to call serial passage studies a natural origin. I don't think it is.
Yeah,
but it is what it is. Like
it's
I think
unlikely that it didn't come from a lab like the level 4 Wuhan, like CDC lab or whatever that's in Wuhan.
It really depends. I mean, if it's gain of function, like there's a lot of people who've posited this. I mean, I've been reading as many papers as I can. on the subject, and it just seems like there have been papers out since the beginning where virologists were saying that they thought it might be. And the way that people reacted, I mean, I know enough about virology. I actually went to school originally for virology. I didn't actually graduate with it at all. I did 1 year of like bio and stuff like that. So like I had a very basic, bio education, but I'd read every book in the world I could possibly get my hands on in high school on virology. So I have a layman's understanding of it. And I can't imagine that you can know where something came from with certainty or where it didn't come from with certainty, like 3 days after you've heard of the thing. And it was amazing to me, astounding to me that all of the origin hypotheses were dismissed. And that really I found to be like very suspicious. I was like, it's not from a lab. How do you know?
Oh,
like,
it definitely came from a bat in the food market.
Yeah, like his name was Mark. Like we've identified that it came from booth 87 in the food market at address 37. I mean, like how, like you probably don't even know who patient 0 is at that point, right? So like as time has gone on, things have been released and revealed, and what a surprise, China lied. And we found that it's very likely that the first patients that we know of who got it were, lab scientists. And
do you think we're going to find out, or do you think it's just going to be like we're going to move on and never find out really what happened?
That's a good question. So we talked earlier about like the tenseness of like the last administration in America and whether like civil war is coming or what. I tend to think that this question hits on why tensions are so high in countries. I think that what's going on is that everyone is sort of being moved from crisis to crisis, and these crises have no conclusions ever. So everyone's waiting for a conclusion. We all want to know answers, because it used to be that like we would get answers. Truth seemed like it had answers, and nowadays they never give us answers. So did it come from a lab? Oh, we'll go look, and then a few months from now they're like, we don't know. And then there's going to be papers and debate, and people are going to wonder. I mean, like this is like right now there's a bunch of Republicans that are auditing the results in Maricopa County, Arizona. And I sit in these channels. I mainly I like going into conspiracy channels because I like to see what people are exposed to. So I sit in this channel and I watch, and it's news all day of some kind. It's people saying that like news is coming constantly. News is always coming.
It's like a freaking Ripple room.
Yeah. And the
QAnon of crypto. That's the Ripple people.
Donald Trump will be reinstalled as president in August, and you're like, what? Like, how did you get there? And I feel like we're living in this perpetual. You ever been to like a horse racing track?
No.
Well, horse racing track is unique. If you go to the horse racing track, you'll hear, like when you go to football, something awesome happens, or I guess in Canada, you guys have some other shitty cricket.
Hockey.
When someone does something really amazing in that broom sweeping game.
Oh, cricket? No, what am I saying? Sweeping.
Yeah, that's the
broom sweeping. Yeah. Sport. Curling.
Olympic sport. Curling. Yeah, I know you guys are really big into curling. So something big happens in hockey, like someone scores a goal, the whole crowd erupts, and it's like it's a literal ejaculation of praise, right? Just wow, right? Well, if you go to a horse racing track, what happens is the ejaculation never happens. It never occurs. The whole crowd is edging, and they're cheering and they're cheering, and the horse comes, and then the one horse wins, and it's like, there was a 1v1 race at the end. People really wanted their horse to win. 90% of the stadium loses, and so there's never an eruption or an ejaculation of like the final. And I feel like we live in perpetual like clapitude, where people are just kind of like, okay, my horse is like gonna maybe win, and then at the end no one wins, and it just kind of like the cheering dissipates, and you move on to the next crisis. And it everything is left unresolved and moves people from anxiety to anxiety. And I think that's what's going on. I think that like we'll never have an answer on the lab leak. I think that we will, for the next 8 months, proceed to believe that our government is pursuing answers, and then it will just kind of dissipate, and we'll go on to the next thing.
And And the next thing is obviously the UAPs.
Maybe, or maybe they'll give us something else.
Maybe.
But I tend to think
there's saber rattling with China going on, so maybe there'll be some sort of China thing happen.
maybe there will be something with China. I don't know, but I've just realized this over the years that like we are moved almost seemingly intentionally from crisis to crisis, and it just seems like it seems
I
deliberate
believe that too,
and like
and
it's populate. But that's my conspiracy, right? Like, but it seems too deliberate, and it seems like population control of
but
a sort.
I think it's the same thing, that we're kind of like herded to distract with sports, entertainment, political division, class division,
Yeah, but
anything like that, and it's just you just continually like there's these
I
enemies.
would say, Brad, that I believe in like healthy distractions, right? I think sports are pretty healthy. These
I
distractions
know,
are like
but like video games is another big one that is,
generally pretty healthy.
is healthy, but just totally wasteful for your skills and your life.
I
If
agree, but
most
generally
people
like not incredibly unhealthy. Whereas
No,
like
not unhealthy. It's social. It's a way to just keep people calm. Like it's a way to get out male aggression without war.
that's
Without
great, but the crisis shifting is at a whole different level, right?
the
Like
crisis shifting. I
just
think is just
crisis
another
shifting
part
is.
of manipulation of the population.
I
It's the
just don't
same
feel
as
like the other ones
politics.
are.
It's the
It
same
just
as
the crisis shifting seems very
Republic,
obviously
Republican versus Democrat is kind of in the same vein as
sure,
crisis shifting and not getting resolution to anything. But I do think it's
sure.
all related to controlling people, and I think it all goes back to the central banks. I do
That I
think it's all
know.
about
That's
money.
where we differ, right? Like I just think that there are insidious, some insidious things happening that seem obvious. They're a little bit black box theoretical, right? Like I don't have like an actor like George Soros, something like that. But they just seem like something's been going
Well,
on,
I
and I
mean,
can't really pin an actor on it.
if you're extremely rich and your class is extremely rich and all of your friends, and I don't believe that there's anything crazy like there's reptiles running the
I'll tell
central
you
bank or
why.
something.
I'll tell you why I don't buy that argument, and it's because income mobility in the United States is so goddamn high. You can move from like poor to rich very quickly.
Yeah, but for the most part, when you get into the political system and you have access to the money printer, you don't move down. You just like politicians, they
Huge
just
numbers of people move down in economic class every year.
yeah,
Huge,
but
huge numbers.
not people that are close to the money printer.
Uh,
Like people that are taking risk go
go
down.
read about the Dukes, the people that are named after Duke University, or that the university is named after. Go read about them. Like you'll find out very quickly that like wealth doesn't last but a couple generations.
Well,
And
yeah, there's a really good book that my friend wrote called "What Would the Rockefellers Do?" And the whole book is a premise on how to build generational wealth. And he contrasts the Rockefellers to the Vanderbilts, and he talks about how the Rockefellers structured everything to continue perpetuating wealth onto the next generation, while the Vanderbilts just kind of like lived a exotic life and
I
bought
just bought that. I
extravagant
just bought
things.
that book.
It's a really good book, and he's got a counter take to like the indexing strategy. So it'll be good to expose yourself to that philosophy, because he's all about like the stock market is too risky, but you can use life insurance and you can use the system to kind of like set up trusts and do self
Trust's got to be invested in something.
yeah, well, these are insurance trusts, I think. No, yeah, you're right. It's
Insurance is investing in something. The
insurance.
whole system is tied together, man. If the stock market
Yeah,
explodes, his thesis goes out the window then.
I think the way that you'll see in the book, but I think the way his structure is whole life, what's it called? Whole life insurance or whole life banking or something like that, where you can leverage your life insurance policy and like use it to like collateralize it, I guess, and use it for other investments like real estate or starting your business or whatever. And then when you die, it gets replenished. Obviously, if the stock market fails, then that whole thing blows apart. But yeah, it's like a whole life insurance policy unlimited banking or something. I don't know. It's a good book. I highly recommend.
I literally just bought that book. It's very funny. My brother read it.
Awesome book, and great story too about the difference between the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers. But
Vanderbilts are still very rich, though. I feel like the Rockefellers are not.
Well, the Vanderbilts, I'm pretty sure that the Vanderbilts are not rich anymore, and the reason is because like they've kind of squandered their money. Yeah, but Anderson Cooper's didn't get any money from his mom. He built all of his money up from CNN.
Really?
Yeah. He didn't get any inheritance, so he's a Vanderbilt. Not many people know that, but he also like has some connection to the CIA and like made hundreds of millions of dollars working for CNN. He's independently wealthy. Well,
kind of say, son. But yeah, that's interesting. Like,
oh, look,
I think the Rockefellers, the Rockefellers are like basically non-existent at this point for money. Like, what do you have? Like, was it Representative Ford or something is like the last one standing?
I think the Rockefeller wealth is supporting like hundreds of Rockefeller heirs.
Really?
Right? Yeah. It's in the book. I don't know how to Google for that, but it is in the book. It's a really interesting read and a good strategy for a contrarian like strategy for not just betting on index funds.
So today the Rockefeller family is worth an estimated $11 billion. Interesting. Huh.
And it's all about how they set up their trusts to continually to fund with life insurance. And then I think his big thing too is to appoint board trustees or whatever that kind of have a mandate to not just give the kids money when they're old enough, but the kids have to submit requests for like a business proposal or university tuition or something. Like they have to submit requests for the money, and then it's slowly released to them. And one of the criteria for them to get any money is that they have to get a whole life insurance policy where the beneficiary is the trust. So it like continually refills the trust with with death benefit money. It's a pretty interesting strategy.
Very interesting. Yeah. Huh.
But yeah, I guess you do have to have, because the trust is able to make that money through the markets. At least, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if that's subsidized somehow, like the life insurance trust.
I'm looking it up now. I didn't know this product existed. This is very interesting.
Yeah, there's another guy too that I started reading. I'm blanking on the name of it. He's got a podcast. The guy actually died recently, but he's got this whole life banking, I think it's called, or something.
Interesting. What is that?
I'll text it to you later if I ever remember it. But he also uses that strategy, and he recommends it. He just holds seminars and stuff like that. He actually sells the insurance and helps people set up the trust.
I'd be very curious. That's interesting.
Yeah. But Americans, you guys get these great things. We don't have access to this in Canada. We don't have the kind of trust that you guys can have. So again, we're kind of shafted.
But you get early Bitcoin ETFs.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's true. We got the Bitcoin BTC QBTC, which is like the first regulated Bitcoin trust that we could put in our retirement account. So that helped a lot of Canadians get access to Bitcoin, and it was still like 15,000 or 10,000 or whatever. So let's wrap this up soon. But in a world where you think, I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing that world either, where the money printer is kind of socialized and fairly distributed to the people rather than just banks and corporations. And it's less relevant to have the price of a stock go up because you're just giving money to people, and therefore it's like less important to have the performance of the stock market fund the pensions and stuff, because you're just giving people the money. So then maybe the stock market can kind of go down and can kind of come down to earth and be more rational without causing an economic depression. And everybody moves to Bretton Woods 2.0. Debt doesn't matter. It's more about the GDP. And we still get the benefits of the money printer, because the money printer and fractional reserve banking, stuff like that, allows some capitalists, like entrepreneurs, to get free money and invent new things.
Maybe America should do a debt jubilee where they give every American $1 million.
Oh man, there we go.
But that all of your debt has to be paid first. So if you have a lot of debt, you get less money. If you have more debt, then you get more. Or so sorry, if you have more debt, you get less money. If you have less debt, you get more.
Okay, but that would have
jubilee.
That would cause a war, though, man. Like that, if just Americans got that shit, it'd be like
only Americans.
It has to be. Everybody has to kind of do the same thing, I think.
They can do it too. I mean, you guys got Chase Bank forgave all of your credit cards.
When did that happen?
About 1.5 years ago, 2 years.
What?
Yeah.
Why didn't I have a Chase Bank account card?
I don't know. You should have.
Jeez.
Canadians, you guys get that. We don't. You know?
Well, we also have been getting. Most Canadians have been getting $2,000 a month from the government since the pandemic started.
Pussies.
Like, we get free money. So Canadians also get free healthcare. I mean, we pay it in high taxes. It's not free, but we're pretty well off as a country. It's just people are in debt up to their eyeballs. We're the most indebted Western nation. I think it's for every dollar. Really? Yeah, for every dollar that a Canadian makes, they owe $1.70 in debt.
Really?
Yeah, and our national debt compared to the U.S. is higher per capita. Like, if you measure it for population. So we print a lot and our taxes are high, but it feels like most people have had a good go of it with COVID. Like, obviously putting aside emotional stuff and health stuff, but like financially, every entrepreneur that I know was at risk of going bankrupt when COVID started. Like, they were like gonna have to shut down their business and stuff. But now a lot of them have gotten loans from the government and support from the government, or just like support from the community who's supporting local businesses. Any kind of contract laborist or anything like that is just booked for months and months ahead. So maybe that's what it'll be like with UBI.
Could be.
Maybe things will be okay. And then, only hope. So what's going to happen to Bitcoin in that world?
I don't know. Bitcoin always goes up.
But why would it? I mean, I think it will too. But why do you think? Just because there's always going to be people that value scarcity?
People need it. People need it. It's just people need Bitcoin. It's a thing that people need. We articulated why earlier. You know, like I said, there's all sorts of uses for it. Bitcoin does things that no one else does. The El Salvador stuff is very important. It's just very, very, very useful. And Wizard Junseth, I like that. Aleph B Tiod.
Yeah, Wizard Junseth. So people, I agree. People need Bitcoin, and the El Salvador stuff is pretty exciting to see a country at least on the path to adopt Bitcoin. We'll see if he gets Bolsonaro or who's the guy from Bolivia? What's his? Not Bolsonaro.
Oh, I don't know. No, Bolsonaro's Brazil.
Yeah.
I don't know who the Bolivian president is.
It sounds like that. Monero.
Alas.
Morales, yeah. Evo Morales.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So we'll see. He was kind of, it's complicated. Who knows what happened there?
We'll see. They might this whole like El Salvador might be the first to kind of do this, and it might catch on in Central America. We will see.
Yeah. So what would you think, like, I mean, let's do a part 2 sometime. We'll get into
anytime.
We'll get into all the NFTs and the XRP and the Elon Doge and the unit bias and all this stuff.
The less interesting stuff. No, I'm kidding. No,
It's funny.
I'd love to talk about something. We can do it again. I absolutely love this conversation. It was great.
Yeah, it was a fun conversation. I'm gonna have to do some more reading about some of these
come back
topics.
with your facts, Brad. Come back with your facts.
You definitely pushed me more towards your perspective.
Yes.
So
That's always what I want.
There's a point for you.
All right, guys.
All right.
I better go. I have a wife who's going to kill me if I
oh shit!
keep on listening. So
usually it's a Clubhouse, but this time it's a podcast.
Yeah, well, it happens occasionally. You know, I do these every once in a while.
Well, thanks a lot for having the chat.
Absolutely, and, Brad. It was a pleasure.
I mean, how do people follow you? You're not on.
Just go on Clubhouse, get in a Bitcoin room. I'll show up.
Right.
From time to time.
Cool. All right, man.
That's it for now. Telegram, Junseth. We have a number of rooms, but if you ever want to, message me, that's the easiest way.
Cool, man. Well, thanks a lot for the chat, and we'll see you later.
Bye-bye.